All right, y'all. Welcome to All Politics and Local America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it's 6 o'clock and it's Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics and Local. You also know if it is the first Friday, y'all know it's the Payne report that's going to be coming up. And that's going to come up at 8 p.m. this evening. However, up first, we're going to talk with, of course, Marques Lewis, and we're going to talk with Corey Lewis, and we're going to talk about the basketball championship that they won. So we're going to talk with them. They're going to be up first, and then of course at 6:40 we're going to talk about the affirmative action. And you want to say who that is, Zaid?
Elise Boddie, strong young legal scholar. I'm calling him young. She's younger than I am, right? Who's been on with us before. Has got a hell of a profile. Strong legal mind. We're very proud of. Linda Carter, a dyed in the wool, Central Ward, uh, Newark resident, Newark native daughter, uh, um, from Essex County College. And Vivian Frazier. I don't know if Vivian has been on with us before. Ed, you have to tell me that. Of the Urban League of Essex County. Very important community resource. And of course, the Urban League has been weighing in heavy on the decision that has overturned affirmative action. So we're looking forward to the engagement with these powerful sisters on this very important, critical moment that we're all facing together.
Right. And then, of course, coming up at 7:30 is going to be DJ Rhino. And we're going to be talking about the comic book Naseed Gifted. So that's going to come up, of course, at 7:30. Then at 8, of course, as I said, we've got the Congressman. So
Right.
we're going to talk with the Congressman, and we'll find out what's going on, particularly on the floor of Congress, as well as talk about what's going on with this, the dial back with the affirmative action, the Supreme Court. I mean, everything, man. It's just it just seemed like everything is just out of control right now. You
This
know?
is the judicial overthrow of the second Reconstruction.
Yeah.
And that's well, I mean, we're gonna definitely lay into that in terms of what that means and what we must do, right? How are the legal, political, and social conditions similar to the overthrow of Reconstruction the first time? How are they different, right? And how must we respond? In the end, that is the big question.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's been going on, Zaid, I don't know if you've seen these texts, uh, particularly from Bashir. I mean, all these articles that are coming out. I saw one Bashir sent me where it said the Mississippi Attorney General orders colleges to drop minority scholarships. I mean, then there's another one where J.D. Vance passes pressing schools on Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling. And then he sent me one today. It says affirmative action battle moves to race-based college scholarships. So, I mean, they're not waiting,
No, that's
right,
right.
in
Right.
order to move on us. And that's the problem, man. We have a tendency of waiting ourselves for what they're gonna do. These folks have been planning, right? So, folks who were getting into these Ivy League schools, they can all but kiss that goodbye.
Well,
This is a new
I th-
challenge.
but I think that's we're talking about two different types of schools. You're talking about what happened in Mississippi, and you're talking about what happened in these southern states. I think they have a plan. I think that that's real clear, right? With some of the colleges that are there, I don't know what their reaction is going to be, which is why we're going to have our guest on just to talk about, because I know that a lot of people are thinking a lot of things right now, and that's why we have experts on to be like, hey, what's going on, what's going to happen, what can we expect, and the other stuff is what we know. Like we know, I think it was Missouri that already said and they're talking about their state schools, right? Which is different. Those aren't even the schools that are covered in the Supreme Court decision, but they're just being like, we're going ahead because we didn't like these anyway. So I think there's going to be a lot of that. But I think we should let's save that part of the conversation, because I think that your conclusions may be right, or they may not be right, but depending on how people are going to react to it. So that's going to be a rich conversation that we're going to have coming up with attorney, law professor Elise Boddie coming up. So Marques, Corey, are you here?
Yes, we here. Yes.
All right. So are you on camera, or are you turning your camera on, or is it just audio?
It's just audio.
Okay. So
my camera.
All right. So welcome to our show. We know that you are coming. That both of you are very accomplished. This is a segment that we had talked about leadership and education and coaching. Right. I'm a debate coach. As many of you know who are listening, we dedicate our time to a type of education that I think is a good education. I coach debate. You coach basketball. You coach Marques. You coach Pop Warner football, and Corey, you coach basketball at Quitman Street School, and both of you won city championships this year. So congratulations to both of you on those championships, on teaching and coaching those kids to championships. And the reason why we have you on is part of a larger conversation about education, leadership, and coaching. Like, what does it mean to coach? What does it mean to you? So we can start off with you, Marques. How many years have you been coaching Pop Warner football?
This was my first year coaching Pop Warner football. I'm a product of Pop Warner football. I played football in high school, played many sports in high school. But what I love most was I was a speech and debate champion and oratorio and declamation. So
I think I remember seeing
days,
seeing your performance, actually.
Yes, sir.
The city championships, right?
Yes, sir. Haling Suleiman was a great influence in my life, and that was a coach. So what I love about what me and my brother's doing is that we're both coaching and impacting thousands of young people each and every day, because our young people, not just on the field or on a basketball court, but at home, they're facing many challenges. Some will come to us broken and need to be put together. And their therapy for that is the sports, is basketball, is football. And we not only become their coach, but we become their fathers and their mentors, and knowing that we're an example, that they're looking at us every aspect of the way. And me and my brother been really doing that. And not only that, we giving back to our community. Many people that know me know I started off as community activist. I'm still a community activist, and that's why I call myself a public servant, not a politician. Anybody could be a politician. I'm a public servant, because I serve the people, and I'm there. I'm like the policeman. When I'm needed, that's where I'm at. So me and my brother, blessed. We come from a background. We lost our father. I was 9 years old. Corey was not even born yet. He was in his mother's belly, and I became a role model to him, and that's why I'm his big brother, but he called me Pops, and we're going down the same path. He's a teacher at Quitman Street School, and I was the former president of the Board of Education.
I was going to say, you're the former president of the Board of Education in Newark, and you mentioned a coach that inspired you. You mentioned Halim Suleiman, right? Halim Suleiman was a poet, right, and an amazing poet, right? That many people may or may not have heard.
In case you didn't hear it,
right? You said, I'm sorry. What did you say, Zaid?
Spirit of the lyric, in case you didn't hear it.
All right. So that's one of his lines?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely, right? Like, he was a prolific poet, worked with Amiri Baraka, traveled the world with his poetry.
Bebop won't stop. Bebop won't stop.
actually released a record in poetry, released a Senate play in poetry, and also was the speech coach for Arts High School. He was your coach there. He also coached Jasmine Mans, who's a internationally famous poet, and she's actually Newark's Poet Laureate now. And when she was doing speech, he was, also tutor. He also coached her. What did you get from? He was what? She was you were the same years.
She was my teammate. We Halim started a group called Dim, where we got to perform on Crossroads. Many people don't know about Crossroads, but that's famous theater where a lot of famous people get to perform at it. Many people don't get
And you're
to
talking about
perform
Crossroads in New Brunswick, right?
there. Absolutely.
Crossroads in New Brunswick is a internationally famous theater, considered part of Off-Broadway. So being at Crossroads was like a major thing, and I think set the grounds for the future with Jasmine, and also you're saying it inspired you as well. Talk to me about your relationship with Suleiman.
Well, Suleiman, because my father was murdered, became a father figure in my life, and he took care of me like I was his son. Him and the street doctor took me under their wings, and even though they were old enough to be my grandparents, they took care of me. And they even had the grandparent,
Marques, I think you jumped off.
There you go. Yeah, we lost you for a second, Marques.
We lost you for a second, but you're back. Marques, you're not. Your sound is on. Yeah, Marques, your sound is on. Yeah, so Marques, I'm gonna move him and put him back. Corey, are you there? Corey's off. All right. All right. So this happens sometimes, and Marques is moving. When you move in, that often takes you out. So hold on. He actually has himself on mute. All right, Marques, are you there?
Back.
Marques, you there?
Oh man, he was.
All right, when he comes back, he was on a roll.
In too.
When he comes back. A lot of times that happens when people are moving. If you're, and be safe, right? When you're driving, be safe as well. But one of the things, just to the things that came out of their interview, is Halim Suleiman and how coaches often are inspired by other coaches, right? Now, Marques, are you back?
I'm back.
Okay. Yeah. So you were off for a while. You were talking about Halim Suleiman. You were talking about him and Street Doctor, and that's when you cut off. Can you continue?
Yeah. So, I was just saying, to have them two men in my life and really be the inspirations that they were, and they didn't give birth to me, was a blessing. So I really appreciate everything that they poured into me, and just like they poured into me, I want to pour into other young men, especially young men, because I think it's very important that our young men have something to look up to, because the television is not a good example or representation of what manhood is really about.
So one of the things you just talked about is that you think that on a level of being a role model, Street Doctor and Halim Suleiman were those role models for you. We know about Halim Suleiman, and we really should do a show that's dedicated to his life because he was so influential. Can you tell us about Street Doctor and his influence on you? Are you there? Marques?
Yeah, he's...
All right. No, we can't. Yeah, we can't hear Marques again. All right. Hopefully he'll get his connection together. But can you tell us about Street Doctor, Zaid?
Well, Street was, when Street got out of prison around 2000-ish, right? He did a tough bid. He was a old street cat. They paid the price for being a street cat in the streets of Newark. And then he came back and created something called the Street Warriors, right? He was very concerned about the violence that was in the community, that was in a place that was a bit different when he went inside, and he got a group of brothers who would also what we call justice impacted, right? That got together and they created this core of brothers that, along with some of us who were already organized at the time, I had just taken over the new Black Panther Party for this area, right? And there were other folks as well in the community too. We just sent off Natasha Allen, right? Natasha was one of my babies that came out of that matrix several years later. Um, and we really began to go to work to make ourselves felt in the community around the particular problem of violence and reaching our young people who were on the edge with that. And Street had his way, had his own unique way of doing that. And I didn't know the depth of his relationship with Marques. A lot of us remember Marques when he was in high school, because he was a bit of an activist as well, right? So a lot of us tried to put our hands on him, to help him, go where we thought he could go with his talent and his newfound commitment. But Street, had his hands on a lot of young people in a range of different ways. Street might touch you in a charitable way if you got something that you needed. You got a challenge in the home front or on the hood front, or he might just, you might be a part of one of his programs and whatnot. Street had a boxing background. For a minute, he worked with a number of gyms, right? Something that I can relate to and Ed can relate to. We could talk all day about that. Right. But Street was one of our homegrown, blessed peacemakers, right? Who'd been through the changes that a lot of Black men go through, unfortunately, but came out and made a real difference. So it's good to hear, the generation that's like this is two generations behind me with Marques,
right?
To lift him up in such a pivotal way, So,
and I think also just that conversation about who were his influences, right? Yeah. And what effect they had on him in terms of coaching, right? Like I think that's important. That's why I wanted you to because we're talking about two people who are no longer here, right? Like Halim Suleiman passed away over 10 years ago, I believe, right? And you have Street Doctor who just passed away maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. But because of the nature of what they did, because of the way in which they coached, they were really helping people. That help, that influence lived beyond them, right? And part of the interview with Marques was doing the actual work that's necessary, even at that age, for leadership. Marques, are you still here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so you were talking about the influence of Street Doctor on you. Can you tell us how Street Doctor influenced you?
Well, Street Doctor influenced me in many ways. Like I said, he was like a father figure to me, and whatever he had to do, he was there. When I needed him in school, he was there. When I needed him to when I needed advice, he was there. He was everything that comes with being a father. And the father, he stepped in, and I wasn't his birth. I wasn't in his blood. But what made me his blood is that I had the drive and the energy of wanting to change my community and wanting to make a difference, make an impact. I was just speaking at a funeral, and Street Doctor grabbed the mic and said, "This is the face of the youth movement." I had no say in it. He did it, and just like a child, when your father says something, you just pick up the bag and do what he says. So that's what I did, and it groomed me to be who I am. It groomed me to be the youngest ever school board member elected in the state of New Jersey and the youngest board president in the country. He made me history. I didn't make myself history. With the power of God.
And so when and his influence, like he had a criminal record, but yet he said, "I'm going to change my life to change my community and make it better." Did that part of this story what did that part of the story mean to you?
It meant a lot to me. You know, it's funny, you know how I met street doctors. I was on the basketball court, you know, at a game, playing a basketball game, and you know how you change your clothes. And I went to change my back into my clothes, and I accidentally dropped the gun that I was carrying with me. And he grabbed the gun and said, "I want to talk to you." And he talked to me, and I broke down crying. It's the first time I heard another man tell me that he loved me, besides my father. You know. So he told me he loved me, and I broke out in tears, and he took me under his wings ever since. And I never looked back. I never touched another gun. I never repped the color. I never went back to the streets, but I pushed forward. And like I said, everyone have their mistakes, their faults. No one's perfect, but it was for the betterment of my community that I became not the problem, but the solution.
And why did you bring the gun to begin with? Do you remember, like, why you even had it? And
How old were you, Marques?
I was only, at the time, I was only 13 years old, you know. And why? Because my community wasn't safe, and I had to protect myself. I felt like I needed to protect myself. My father wasn't around. You know, I had to protect my mother, my family. I had to protect my family. But the street doctor showed me the better way. You know, he said, you feel tough with that gun, but you really gonna feel tough when you become the face of this youth movement and change your community. And I felt more powerful right now without a gun than I ever felt in my life.
And so it was that relationship with Street Doc. So there were two people who are no longer with us that deeply influenced your life. Because as you said, you met Street Doctor at 13. I remember seeing you when you were 17, maybe 18, at the City Finals Championship, right? Like Halim Suleiman was your coach, and his kids in speech and debate at Arts High School in Newark were phenomenal. Like, he was a poet who happened to coach, and everything he did, your team, in terms of like what you did and all those performances, were amazing. Did you perform Fences when you were a senior? Was that you, Marques?
He's muted.
Yes, I did.
That was.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. And even when I was on the team, debate wasn't my thing. But one year they were shorting debaters, so Harlan came to me and Solomon Williams, who was on the team at the time. You remember Solomon? Okay. And said, they short debaters, so I'm paying y'all two as a team to debate. And we like, what? We know nothing about debate. He's like, yes, you gonna do it. And you know, first time debating, we came out in third place.
Nice.
And then he said, that's gonna be what y'all gonna do. Or me and Solomon looked at each other like, we're not doing this no more. Let him say we're doing, but we're not doing it. And we found our way out of it by doing better in our categories.
Okay.
that we loved, and that was poetry, the declamation, and the original oratory. And you know, so I'm like, if I didn't want to do debate, I had to do good in my other categories to stop him from trying to put me in debate. So that's what made me push. And then I had the blessing to have Mary Baraka as one of a mentor, because that was his best friend.
Right.
So you know, having the two greats in front of me and performing in front of, even if I did good, they'll tell me I did terrible. You know, Mr. Suleiman used to fall asleep while we in the middle of us doing our pieces in front of him. He'll wake up, say, do it over. That's not good.
Right, because you're trying to push people to greatness. You're trying to push them to be the best. So if it's mediocre, other kids would be like, other people might go, right. They might be like, yes, that's good. You spoke. That's good. But you know, when we're coaching, we have different standards, so we have different expectations, right?
Absolutely.
So
even when we got first place at a competition, he still said, read over what the comments was. You know, they used to give us comments sheets, and we'll read the comments, and he'll say, don't listen to what they saying. He said, because what they saying, you did terrible. You could ought to do better.
So are you bringing anything from your past coaching to your the way you were coached before to your present.
Absolutely.
So you coach
Absolutely.
Pop Warner football right now. Can you explain what Pop Warner is? You won the city championship in Pop Warner football. What is Pop Warner football?
Pop Warner is our Pee Wee football league where our kids is 5 to 13 play flag football and go up age groups from there. My 9U team, which I coach, became the champions, undefeated. We thought we wasn't gonna have a season because we were the only non-U team in Newark. But we was undefeated, so we could have sat home and just collected the championship. But my team, we strive for greatness. We didn't take the cheap way out. We still went and played every week and won every game. Went to nationals and lost in the first round, but it was only because our kids is not prepared to compete on a national level, and we took that from that experience that we got to teach our kids how to be great and how to compete against kids that don't look like them. So they beat us because we wasn't used to that. Our kids wasn't used to that. We didn't know it, so we took that, and now we're building a program where we teach our kids the fundamentals of football from the beginning to the end. We're not always on the football field. We take 2 days a week and we go in the classroom, teach them their position and teach them their plays. And that you don't get that in the Pop Warner football really.
All right, so this is
That's on
great.
a high school level.
Right, but this is great because this is where I'm at, right? Like, and what I think coaching should be, especially in places like Newark. If you're not coaching people to be the best, not just in the city, if you're not trying to coach them to be the best in the country, you need to rethink what you do, right? Like, you want to give every kid the opportunity to shine, no matter where they are or who they play against. And I like what you talked about just now. You said you went to the nationals, you got your hats handed to you, but your reaction wasn't let's stay in Pop Warner. Your reaction was let's rethink what we're
Straight
teaching
up.
and how we're teaching it so that our kids can't compete with anyone now. Like, right now I'm in Iowa, right? Behind me is a statue of George Washington Carver. He went to Simpson College, and I've been teaching debate for 2 weeks and teaching it to kids from around the country who want to learn debate better and many of whom want to debate at a national level. But it's also where I learn how to coach at a national level, because there's some great debate minds here and you can pick their brains. They're very generous with information and you find out how to better teach and train your kids. And even though our team has had quite a bit of success, it doesn't stop, right? Because you're always learning. Like, I'm learning in these last 2 weeks. My students, because as time goes on, debate changes, students change. So you got to grow, you got to learn, and push yourselves as a coach so that we can push these kids and they can have the opportunities that they deserve, right? So I appreciate that perspective. How far are you along? Like, did this just happen this year in terms of nationals?
Yes, first year coaching. We already went to the nationals. My boys is energized. They like, coach, we ready to go back. They ready to take it back. And it was funny because a lot of people was like, oh, those kids gonna quit because they're not used to losing. Because they've been winning all year long. But these kids took it as their fuel, wanting to come back and want revenge. And that's what
Right.
I love about them, their energy, and those my kids, and all their mothers know. Like, anything happens to them, they call me. They get in trouble in school, they call me. The teachers know who I am, because it's about making sure that you invest in the child, the whole child, not just the sport of the child, but the
Right.
whole child, mentally, physically, spiritually. I make sure that they spiritually inclined, no matter what religion that they're a part of, but they're spiritually inclined, and also that they're well taken care of. Anything they need, they know they can call. If I don't have it, I will make sure find a way to get it for them. And that's what coaching is really about. And that's what I learned from Halim Suleiman. That's what I learned from Amir Baraka. And that's what I learned from every coach that ever coached me or been involved in my life. I used to be like a person that was standoffish, didn't let too many people get close to me. But when people care, and that's what I tell everybody, kids know when you care
That's
and when
right.
you don't. They know when you're fake and they know when you're phony. So if a kid gravitate to you, it's because they can sense that you're a good person. That's why if I want to know how somebody is, I just send a kid around them. If the kid come back and tell me that they got bad energy, guess what? I ain't going around them because they got bad energy because the kid know what they're talking about.
So, what are some of the things that I like what you said when you? I'm really going back to this when you said we went to the nationals. These kids were better resourced. They had better training. I'm going back, and the kids were motivated. In a story, I'm not the first debate coach at Science. When Brent Ferrand, the original debate coach at Science, when he first started the team, he was told by administrators that they didn't want us to debate kids from the suburbs because they didn't want us to get our feelings hurt. And he laughed and he was like, "Nah, I think you got it twisted. Our kids aren't the ones whose feelings you're going to need to worry about, right?" And that's been kind of like the thing, not just with us in debate, but I really think that's the thing in Newark in general, right? Like what you described as the kids came, they competed at nationals, they got beat. It wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to compete anymore. It's what do we have to do to get better? And as a coach, you got to ask, what are the resources we need? What is the training we need? How do we need to improve as coaches to be able to better serve these kids so that when we do this next year, we can get different results, right?
You said
So
the
those,
key word. You said the key word resources. And
right.
that's what our kids lack resources. They don't have the same resources that these other kids have. And that's why, it's good to have somebody that's connected and that can get the resources that the kids need. Not every coach have that ability, but because I have that ability, I use it to my advantage. We have the resources. Anything that my kids need, and I just get the quote. And I said, listen, this is what my kids need. There's people that donate all the time, NFL players who came through this organization through the Central Cougars, who now play professional football or other professions, and the alumni of the Central Cougars are giving back now, donating money, donating equipment. The New York Giants have donated helmets and cleats and belts. That's when you give the kids the tools that they need to be successful, then they are successful. They just want the tools. And
The
these kids are
opportunity.
really getting the tools. They're getting the tools to seize the opportunity, like you said, brother. Like, thank you for that. They're getting the tools that need with Tahir giving back. He bought the uniforms last year, brand new uniforms. Everybody got brand new uniforms from his foundation, and kids that needed to couldn't afford to pay the tuition. We gave them scholarships because other people donated money towards it. We have council people who kids are now playing on our team or cheerleading on our team. It's about resources. Uh, all type of politicians are giving because these kids are hungry. They see it. I just invite them to a game. I don't even ask them. Just come to the games, see what these kids are doing, and people buy into it.
Right. So, and that's really important, right? And I think when you're talking about buy-in, the kids buying in are really the most important thing, right? Like, how do the kids
Absolutely,
actually buy in to what you're saying on this issue of leadership, right?
absolutely,
How does that
yes.
work? How do you get to kids' minds so that they buy in? And what are the things that you're using that previous coaches have used for you?
Well, we people used to just give people titles like captains and stuff because of seniority. I make my captains earn their title. In order to be a captain, you got to be a leader. My lineman, I tell them, you are the first line of defense. Your job is to block the ball, block our quarterback from getting hit, our running back from getting hit, and also to get to the ball when we're on defense. So I see you want to be a captain on this team, you got to earn it, and they buy into earning it, because I don't want them to ever think that things are handed to them. So they buy into leadership. When you're a leader, that means when we're on a track running, you shouldn't be walking, right? Because you're a leader. You got to lead by example. So you shouldn't be walking. You should be encouraging your teammates. When they mess up, good job. You get them next time. And we're a family. That's what I tell them. We're a family. And in families, we argue, we mess up, we make mistakes. But guess what? At the end of the day, we're there for family. And they buy into one family, one team, one city.
Yeah, that's important. That's important what you're saying, Marques. That's important.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Right. So with Marques, one more thing, right? Like when you're talking, and when you're talking about what you need to do in order to get coaching together in the way that you do. Can you tell us like just a story from your coaching that where you knew that you made a difference after the fact? Like you mean like something that happened that you know that wow, this I made the right decision.
Well, this it was many circumstances that made me realize I made the right decision. But the
Right.
first
Right.
time, first time when I realized it was one of my players got hurt. I was going to get him for practice, and he got hit by a car, and I felt like it was my own son. I cried. I went to the hospital to visit him. I made sure that like he was all right. And to this day, I still make sure whatever he needs, I talk to him, check on him. Birthdays, I'm
Right.
there. Holidays, I'm there. Um, so that's, and when you go through something like that, experience like that, it put the everything in perspective for you. And he wasn't the only one. I had a kid today who's going to Disney World, and he didn't have to go. He called me and just, coach, I want you to know I'm going to Disney World today with the family. I said, okay, be safe, love you. He said, okay, I just wanted you to know where I was at. So that makes you know that you're making an impact in a child's life when they just attached to you. But that circumstance of, being there in the hospital really put everything in line that I'm really responsible for this individual, and I tell everybody every day now in an organization that I'm now the vice president of, that you know the 151 kids that's in this organization are my children.
And that's both the power and the challenge of the responsibility, right? Is that once you make a teaching and coaching is a
Absolutely.
commitment, right? And folks who are going into it need to understand that, right? That there are young people who are not just looking up to you, but while you are in their presence, particularly something that has athletic changes too, because kids can also get hurt if you're not responsible with them, and you're responsible on that level too, right? It's really important for the teacher to own the responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, you keep talking about why that's so important.
Yeah, it's very important because the parents entrusting you with their children, and they gotta feel like when your child is with them, that they're safe. And I take on that responsibility seriously. I don't take the games to it. I don't think it's a game. I think it's serious. Because I treat them like they're my child. They need something, coach. I need something. I'll go in my pocket and I give it to them. Because and people need to understand, we don't get paid to coach. That's what people think. They think because you're a coach, you get paid. We don't. We do not get paid to coach by wanting football. We do it because we care and because we're really committed to the children of our city. That's all.
And street and was definitely like that. As was Halim. Halim was definitely like that, you know, and that's real stuff. That's real stuff. That's something that I can certainly identify with. I was probably a better trainer of fighters than I was an actual fighter myself back in my days, and as such, and we had a great gym. We took kids around the world doing what we did, but when it came to making sure that we had the space and time to do what we needed with them, we fought for that. We fought for those kids. We advocated for those kids, right? And that's something else that's also comes with that kind of responsibility. You touched on the question of the challenge of resources. Now, this is a relatively new role that you're talking about now, coaching. And you've had some success. So how has that affected at all your access to the resources you need to do well?
Positively, because we have the resources now, the kids are more energized and motivated. What we did with the 9U team was they won a championship, so all of them just going to receive jackets, championship jackets. That I think that's going to motivate other people to want to win championship. We're looking at other creative ways, like when the kids do get honor roll, because academics is still also important to us. Being a former board president. So if they get honor roll, we give them a free pizza party or, a gift card to go to the movies with their family or out to eat. We're just finding ways to motivate, and because we have the resources, we're able to do that. And the kids are more committed, more dedicated, and the parents are even more excited about coming out and supporting their children.
Marques, I was with you a few minutes ago. Where were we? We were at the funeral of the great Natasha Allen.
Another soldier who
NAACP
gave her all.
Great peacemakers. Put what you're talking about in a context.
And I know that we're coming out to the end of the section, because I know that we're getting ready to start the next section. So we're gonna, Marques, we're gonna have you back, right? Because I know we're juggling stuff. I know we're gonna definitely have you back. But Marques, I'm combine the. We always ask the question of who you're listening to now in terms of hip hop, but can you combine that in this last section as we switch to the next segment?
All right. Now what you're saying is that?
No, yeah. What I was asking is place what you're doing in the context of us, all of us. We've done and have been trying to do to reduce the whole question of violence in our community, and then let us know who you're rocking with.
So this definitely helps with what we're doing with the anti-violence, because them babies that we're mentoring each and every day, they're the next generation. We want to make sure that they're not out here committing them crimes, that they're not out here uh, doing bad, but they're actually giving back just like us and being a mouthpiece for their generation. So what we're doing is affecting the tomorrow by preparing our children for their future. And because I rock with our kids, I also rock with Biggie Smalls.
Nice.
Love how you did that.
Absolutely. So thank you, Marques, man. We appreciate you. We appreciate the work that we do.
Give your brother love too. We got to get him back on with you.
Yes. While I go off, I want to just mention this. I ain't gonna give y'all all the details, but y'all gonna see us soon. The Lewis boys, we're doing something big. Watch for us soon.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, beloved.
All right. Thank you, man. Thank you. All right. So we know that there's been a lot of. We're switching to the second topic that we have, and we know that there have been some Supreme Court decisions, and we're going to be having a series of conversations on what that means in terms of the Supreme Court and what that has traditionally mean. Right? We have a lot of different. it's something funny. People have like, whoa, the Supreme Court, they just sent in L's to women last year, sending L's to Black people this year, sending L's specifically to Black women this year. And when we're looking at this situation, often many people don't know what to deal with, specifically on affirmative action, right? On the affirmative action decision, there are a lot of people who are like, what does that mean? You hear different representatives in different states saying that, hey, we're no longer going to have race in admissions, and they're taking away scholarships, and they're doing other things, right? We have the pleasure of having our guests on. Now, we're going to be doing a series of conversations on affirmative action, and we are happy to have a professor at the University of Michigan on this week to really talk about what's going to happen, or this decision. We have the Elise Boddie is currently a professor at the University of Michigan. She was recently a professor at Rutgers University. She has worked for and I guess we can say that where you most recently worked for a little bit. She worked at the Justice Department recently as maybe a few months ago, and has really unique insights into this affirmative action decision and this court. She was also part of Joe Biden's commission on the Supreme Court, right? So she was part of the commission on the Supreme Court as well. In addition to that, Elise Boddie is a personal friend of mine that I'm honored to know since I was like 18 years old, right? Like in terms of freshman in high school. She was also chief litigator at the Legal Defense Fund, and was really happy to be able to get her on for this time, because I know that it's very difficult to be able to get her time. And so we're really happy that we have this unique time with her. So thank you, welcome, and talk to us. You feel some kind of way about this decision for many reasons. Were you at all, like you were working in the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, yes?
Yes, that's right. I left a couple of weeks ago, so it's relatively. I'm newly back in the civilian world.
Okay, and were you at all involved in terms of just what was going on with this case or decision, and what are some of your thoughts on it? Like as a professor who's going to be teaching about this, what are some of your thoughts about this?
Well, I can say that this was not unexpected. I think it's fair to say that it was widely anticipated that this would be the result. This is a court that is very hostile to any uses of race for purposes that would appear to benefit Black people as well as other people of color. And so sadly, it was not surprising. I held out the faint hope that maybe the court would surprise us, but alas, that was not to be the case. I've spent a good chunk of my career working on issues of racial justice and civil rights. As you noted, I was at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund for some time. And I've done a lot of work writing about issues of racial equity and racial fairness. This decision, I think, is over time will come to be understood as a terrible decision. Again, not unexpected, but a terrible decision, and not because affirmative action in its prior iteration before the court struck it down was that robust. I don't think that I thought the impact of affirmative action, the practical impact of affirmative action, I think was limited for reasons that have to do with the way that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment has been interpreted over time. That's a whole other conversation that we can have. The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution has been stripped of its force over a number of decades. That being said,
when you say that, just to give context, the 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection of all citizens. It was formed after the Civil War. It was with the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, the 14th Amendment giving equal protection under the law, and also establishing formerly enslaved people as citizens of the United States. So in the inception, you're saying in the history, it was a reformative, reparative action very specifically for slavery, right? And you're saying that it's been stripped of its power. What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's been stripped of its power primarily because it's been weaponized against Black people and other people of color. And I think that is one of the significant harms of this decision, is that it takes what it was supposed to be a racial good, that is providing access to Black people and other people of color, access to higher education. It has taken that objective, which we would think of as a good thing, and turned it against Black people and other people of color. So, and the shift here, the move that this court has done is to equate policies that help Black people and other people of color with policies that harm people of color. So policies that are intended to help people of color, Black folks, are equated or analyzed the same way as policies that are harmful. And that sounds, if it sounds weird and counterintuitive, it should. And because the court over time has applied the exact same standard, which in constitutional language we refer to as strict scrutiny. Any consideration of race by the government is subject to the most rigorous, the harshest review. The court is most skeptical of those kinds of policies that specifically use race. And so what that has meant is if you use race to help Black folks, the court is going to analyze that in the same way that it would analyze policies that are used to harm Black folks.
Now it's interesting, right? Because the way that they wrote the decision, it seems like they decontextualize the words in the Constitution, right? Like the 14th Amendment no longer has a historical context and no longer has a context of dealing with some level of slavery, like dealing with slavery. It's the same thing with the Civil Rights Act, right? Like in terms of the way that it's interpreting race. Do you think that it seems like that it doesn't necessarily have to be contextualized in terms of language, and that, like, if legacies are justified, right? And if legacies aren't race, but they're justified because they're not racial in their wording or makeup. But we do know that legacies would be predominantly white based on the history of that particular thing. If you had legacies of enslaved people, it's not race, right? It's not a racial context. Race is not being used. It's a legacy of enslaved people. Would that meet that definition, right? Would it be along the same lines as legacies? Or is that part of the creative thinking that people are looking at in terms of going around? Like you could say legacies of coal mining, right? Like, and that would be predominantly white people in West Virginia, right? Who you might be able to prove through social science have a lot of inequity, right? Like, so is there a possibility that we can just look at the historical impact of these things and create categories that more specifically and maybe more precisely deal with what we are talking about anyway, especially given how the racial terms have evolved over the last 30 years, right? If you say Black in 1965, 1966, that meant you were directly the descendant of enslaved people. If you're saying that now, if you say Black, I mean, there's a Pan-Africanist understanding of Black now, or African American, that maybe didn't exist as much or was as prevalent in 66, 67 in terms of just numbers or demographics?
Yeah, I think it's a really excellent question, and I mean, there are a lot of people who are trying to think right now about the kinds of policies that could pass constitutional review by this court. I think the one that you've identified, so if you can trace a legacy of slavery in your family, one could say, yes, you should be considered for admissions to some of these institutions, because we know about the long-standing inequities that resulted from a history of enslavement and the intergenerational consequences of that, including the relative disadvantage that Black families have relative to white families in terms of transfers, intergenerational transfers of wealth and so forth. I think the difficulty, frankly, with this court is that I highly suspect that there is no bottom with this court. And what I mean by that is, so, and just again to sort of step back into the constitutional frame for a minute, just so I can explain myself. The court has said that, again, race conscious, meaning specific uses of race to benefit Black people, people of color, will be treated the same as policies that are used to harm. One of the other wrinkles here, or one of the questions that is now beginning to surface, is whether the court will also treat what we describe as racially neutral uses of race the same as deliberate, intentional, race-conscious uses of race for purposes of equal protection. So, for example, so what you've described, Jonathan, would be race neutral, right? You're saying we want to identify people who have a documented history of enslavement in their family, and to provide a benefit that would address some of the intergenerational harms of that. But there are movements now in the law where you have people on the other side, the same people who are bringing these challenges to affirmative action policies, are saying, well, what you are actually trying to achieve is a racial outcome. And because it is a racial outcome, we're going to subject you to the same rigorous standard of constitutional review that would also apply to race-specific, race-conscious uses, policies, and preferences, so to speak. And so the difficulty is that there may be a shift in the law, because we're seeing some of this in the lower courts already, I should say. So it is possible that over time that may percolate up to the court. So there is that. I don't want to sound defeatist. I don't like it when.
Now you say there's a shift on the groundswell right now. What do you mean by that? Like, what are we seeing in lower courts that kind of supports what you're saying right now?
We are seeing challenge to what we describe as facially race-neutral policies that have a race-conscious purpose. So just as you described, okay, let's have a policy that looks at the legacy of enslavement. That's not specifically, it's not a racial classification, so to speak. We're not saying, okay, we're going to apply this policy just to Black people. We're going to apply it to this people who have this history of enslavement. That may not.
People who have a history of enslavement in the United States. Right?
I didn't catch what you said.
Oh, I said yes. There could be white people who have a history, can trace it back to maybe they were enslaved in the United States. Maybe that's possible, right? Like, because it seems like the Supreme Court says that history and context don't matter, but you have this category. So and what I'm saying is, even if, like, for legacies, we know that legacies help disproportionately white people. They don't have to justify a purpose for it. They don't have to say, hey, we want to have more wealthy white people within the university, so we're going to have legacies. They just say, we want legacies. and they put them in. Legacies of people who went to Yale.
Yeah,
Or
I'm
any
not. I just want to be really clear. I'm not fighting your.
Oh,
your
no, not at all. I'm just really,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
asking for the nuances, because what you're explaining is great.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is it may not make a practical difference for this court, because if you have it is still a race conscious purpose.
So they would have to say, we want enslaved people just because. There's no social justice that's involved in it at all, right? Just like we want West Virginia, people from West Virginia mining. We just do, right? Just like we want legacies. There would have to be something along those lines of not giving a racial justification, but simply saying enslaved people, people who have legacies of genocide of Native Americans, people who were legacies of West Virginia coal mining, and just not give a further explanation of it. Just like, hey, we think that these people would be better in our university, just like legacies would make our university better. Like, so they have to look and be like, oh, because eventually I think what you're suspecting is, and you're just, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're saying is this court, it's kind of like that Kanye line back in 2006 when he was talking about George Bush. They just don't like black people, right? Like if there's anything that they think is going to help black people, they're going to be like, nah, you can't help black people. You can't do it. You want to help black people. We're saying, no, you can't help black people. And someone like, but legacies. And it's like, that's not race.
And I just want to be really clear. I'm not saying that will definitely happen. I'm just saying that having watched this court for some time and given what we're seeing develop in the lower courts, that the same folks who brought this case are the folks who would bring that other case. And can I just say a word about the context of how this case arose? Because I think that's important.
Yes.
Just understand what's happening behind the scenes with these cases. So you can't really understand this case until you understand the person who brought it, whose name is Ed Blum. He's a bad actor. He's been going after affirmative action for a number of years. He brought cases against the University of Texas multiple times, affirmative action cases. He was representing a white woman, Abigail Fisher, who couldn't even show that she had been harmed by affirmative action. That case didn't really go anywhere, but he's also brought the case that took down the preclearance provision of the Voting Rights Act. That was the provision that said if there's a history of discrimination in a particular state, and that state proposes a voting change that would have a discriminatory impact, it had to be reviewed by the Department of Justice.
Right.
Had to be pre-cleared by the Department of Justice before it could go into effect. One of the most powerful civil rights tools we have ever had in the history of this country, and he brought the case that struck it down. So this is the kind of guy who is he's been going anything that has even a scintilla of a whiff of trying to help Black people in this country. He has gone after those policies. So there is a very dedicated focus, let's just say, by people who are trying to roll back civil rights and have rolled back civil rights in a very meaningful way. So they're very determined. It's not like these cases don't come out of thin air. They are developed over time by very well-resourced people who have a lot of money. He was a Wall Street banker, and he's financed a lot of these cases. So that's also, it's important for folks to understand that context.
So, and that's real interesting because essentially it's like there are dedicated resources. Like people talk about conspiracy theories. Oh, this is a conspiracy theory. No, they're just people who are dedicated to rolling back voting rights and advances in civil rights, and they're well resourced, and they can spend all day thinking about it, right? They can spend all day thinking about and financing and putting in legal plays
and
to
they
actually
can resource politicians that pick judges who will do that.
Yes.
And we can't get around the question of politics. I know you're trying to get there, Jonathan, but we can't get around that.
So can you ask the question directly?
Well,
Or
we just as you just contextualize Bloom and his background, we need to look at how we got these people on the court in the first place, right? What are the politics that put them there? What's the purpose that put them there? What's the voter suppression that put them there? What's the agenda driving? I can remember sitting, being in legal history classes. They used to talk about judicial restraint and judicial activism, and conservatives were about judicial restraint. They're just as intentional and purposeful about rolling back these important social gains as that happened some years ago in the aftermath of Reconstruction. So I want to ask the question with a long view, Elise, and take us back to how this has happened previously. And then the ultimate question is, how do we respond? What tools do we have to fight back as much as we can? How long is it going to take us to recover? What's different about this particular moment than those dark days in the aftermath of Reconstruction?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up Reconstruction. I've been thinking a lot about that because I do think that this court, what the post-Reconstruction court did, we got cases like Crookshank, that sanctioned the slaughter of Black people outright, and Plessy versus Ferguson, of course. This court is very close to that. I wouldn't say they're as bad yet as a post-Reconstruction court, but they are definitely in that vein. And how we got
explain Crookshank just briefly before going.
Crookshank involved basically it was the Colfax massacre that occurred when Black people basically took up arms to defend themselves against a sort of white vigilantes, white supremacists. And the court found that they could not bring a case. There was no cognizable harm because or under the Equal Protection Clause, because these were private citizens effectively that had engaged in this behavior. There was no what's called state action, meaning that the government would have had to be complicit. It's a lot of sort of, it's a jargony way of saying that the court in the Crookshank cases basically said to Black folks whose families had been slaughtered, you have no case.
Wow.
Anyway, that's a whole. Crookshank is by far one of the worst. In
the language of hip hop, it ain't our fault. Yes.
Right. And it's interesting. The reason why I asked that is because the way you described it was, it seemed like the court was like, yes, you were like, there was a massacre. Many of you were murdered,
yes,
but we're finding that you had no standing. Or it seems like, but it was okay. And I never heard of that.
It was not a harm that could be recognized by the court effectively. Wow. Yeah. So and how we got to this place. I have a lot of feelings about that. Because if you might remember, right, we had the 2016 presidential election, which brought in a certain Donald Trump. We had the death of Justice Scalia, the death of Justice Ginsburg. There were vacancies on the court that came up during or around Trump's presidency. And then you had the fact that Senator Mitch McConnell literally stole one of the seats that should have gone to President Obama. So what that means as a practical matter is that President Trump had 3 appointments to the Supreme Court. And, at the time that happened, one could foresee what we're dealing with now. Because 3 appointments to the Supreme Court, there are only 9 justices on the Supreme Court, and they have life tenure. Right. So when you put 3 people on the court, especially the 3 that got on the court, there are going to be some very serious consequences. And this is one of them. And so, I think one of the things that, I'm sure your audience is well aware of, but many people, just may not pay as much attention to, is the power that this court has. And this case is one example. It's not even necessarily the worst example. I mean, the court has had terrible decisions in other areas of the law. So we can't underestimate the importance of paying attention to the court. The issue now is that the justices who were put on that court by President Trump are very young. This is a young court now, which means that these folks are going to be around for a while.
What would be the constitutional justification? Because this has been talked about. You were on a committee for Biden on the Supreme Court. Would this be a time, or would this be constitutionally possible to add justices to the Supreme Court to do court packing in response to the politics that you're talking about, or would that be unconstitutional?
Congress does have power to expand the size of the court. I think to be honest with you, I have mixed feelings about that. I'd prefer term limits. The reason why I have mixed feelings about court expansion is because unless you hold political power, there will be a counter response. And so you can add more progressive justices to the court, but the other side is going to expand the court, and they're going to add their folks to the court. So I think term limits are the better way to go. The practical problem is that term limits have obviously a longer time horizon, because you have to, impose term limits, and then the term limits have to be served. So I think term limits is a better long-term response. I do understand the frustration and the desire to expand the court, but we also just have to be aware of the law of unintended consequences. So I don't know that would be a perfect solution. Maybe all that we can get, frankly, but
Like it would be like for Biden to expand the court would be a political declaration of war, as in like politically, that the court's going to be expanded the next time. But
just to be clear, Congress would have to expand it.
And that would it be Congress and the Senate, or just the Senate?
Congress would have to vote to expand the court.
Okay, which would
I understand it. I'd have to double check that, but I think it's Congress as a whole. The Senate couldn't do it by itself.
Okay, fair enough. Which means it couldn't happen now anyway, right? In terms of that, it wouldn't be even a short-term solution to that. In the meantime, right? What are the practical issues? Like, I'm a high school teacher. I'm a debate coach. I have kids who are applying to college next year. I teach in Newark. I have a lot of kids who may be applying to Ivy League schools. I actually have one. One of my debaters is definitely vying for valedictorian, and she's applying to Ivy League schools. What advice would you give them in terms of, based on this court's decision, because part of the issue, and maybe this can be compelling, right? Or maybe you can answer this. Affirmative action, as it worked, what was the benefit? Why was affirmative action even needed? Like, people are like, hey, just work hard, right? Like me, I know absolutely benefit of affirmative action. Yale didn't recruit in Newark, right? They especially weren't recruiting as science. There were kids who were at Yale who petitioned the admissions office and literally came to Newark. They'd gone to schools that were on the other side, and the admissions office says, we just don't get a lot of applications there, and we don't have a lot of Black people in the pool. They went to science, they went to other schools in the city, and they literally gave us applications. Like, everybody in my class, everybody in the honor sections of my class got an application and were encouraged to apply. And that was true at different places continually. And so they increased their application pool. They looked at essays. They looked at a lot. So what is the impact of affirmative action being gone in that way? And what advice would you give to high school kids?
So let me, so there are a lot of different ways to answer that question. The short answer is that I want to be very clear, because I think there is a tendency to conflate some of the uses of race that are used as part of the admissions system, not the admissions decision itself, but as part of the admissions system. So what I've been saying to people is that this case was about who gets admitted, and that the process, the use of race in the admissions decision, I should say, in the admissions decision. Recruitment, there is no indication that recruitment, race-conscious recruitment, is unconstitutional. So I would say, yes, you can still recruit Black students from Newark, from students from Newark generally. There's no constitutional bar for that. In terms of the admissions process itself, it's not fully clear to me yet what that means as a practical matter. There was, as part of the opinion, interestingly enough, addressed the use of the essay. The Justice Jackson, and I would encourage everyone to read Justice Jackson's dissent in this case, talked about, at the oral argument, she said, well, what about a Black student who wants to talk about her experience as a Black person, in America, and she wants to have that, she wants to talk about that in her essay. Is she now barred from doing that? And so in the decision, in Chief Justice Roberts' decision, he says, no, there's nothing that prevents a student from doing that. But, and this was kind of weird, and frankly, I think people are still trying to figure it out. He says something along the lines of, but the essay can't be considered because of what the student says about his or her race. They could say, oh, well, I had this decision as a Black person, and it has affected me in this way, but the admissions officer can't use the specific race of the student. They have to tie it to something race neutral that the student said in the essay. I don't fully understand that, but I would say that students should write about their experience. I don't think they should hide their race. Having said that, there are indications that both the College Board and perhaps colleges and universities will find ways to prevent racial information from reaching admissions officers. So one might suspect that even if, having said what I just said, it is possible that colleges and universities may excise, may somehow delete information, racial information, from the application in order to make sure that they're compliant. I don't know that that's definitely going to happen. I think there are a lot of people still trying to figure out what this means for practical purposes. But
do you have to black out Black? Is it going to look like one of those FBI releases where it's redacted? You have redacted essays.
Yeah. Well, the College Board, as I understand it, has put, there's some something that they've done with their their process, which is not allowing people to disclose their race. I believe I read that somewhere recently. So this is still, people are still working through this process and what it's going to mean.
One thing that was, well, there were a lot of things that were confusing, but one thing that stood out as confusing in the logic of the decision was the military exception. Because it seems like if it's a violation of the 14th Amendment, it's a violation of the 14th Amendment. If it's racism, it's racism. Why the military exception? Why is it that, well, this makes sense in the context of the military, but not at elite institutions?
So I think one thing about that footnote is they kind of massage the point a little bit. I think what they said is that there could be a difference in the context of the military academies. They didn't actually say that there was, but they certainly suggested that there could be. And I'm sure people will, read it that the court is signaling that maybe this decision won't apply in that context. But having said that, I mean, I think it's appalling because what they're saying is, well, it's okay to be race conscious so that people can go die for their country, but it's not okay to use it in a context of promoting opportunity and access to higher education. And so I thought it was offensive. I mean, it does arise in the context of prior affirmative action decisions where there was some discussion about the important benefits of diversity to camaraderie in the military. So it may have emerged from that context as well. But I took it to mean that if there was an exception, that they were saying, well, you can recruit, you can be race conscious for purposes of, fighting in a war or what have you, just basically serving in the military. And I find it offensive that you would carve out an exception for that, but not for education.
Right. And that's why it seemed to be like, really? Like it almost was. And I think that Judge Brown actually talked about that, right? Like in terms of why this military? Like why is this that the level of offense that went there, right? Like, so given the, and I'm not saying unpredictability of the court, but given the potential predictability of the court, how do you think colleges are going to go forward? And what are some, like, is this giving colleges the excuse to do what they always wanted to do anyway? As we see in some of the southern states, they're like, hey, we were giving scholarships based on race, no more. If you were getting a scholarship based on diversity before, and we're no longer doing that. Is it giving some people just an excuse to do what they want, or are there workarounds in terms of, hey, class? Like, it seems like the court kind of said that class is okay, but race is not. Is that a thing?
Well, so this goes back to so class on its own, I think would definitely be would pass muster, would survive a constitutional challenge. Class as a proxy for race may not. So they might say, yes, we'll consider class, but we're not going to consider class for purposes of trying to get at race. That issue is an open issue that still is out there and may be litigated in the next round of cases. So that's something to watch for in the lower courts, because that's where these issues start to percolate and then they get fed to the Supreme Court.
And I think that to go back to where we were before, we talked about some of the issues in the lower courts. I don't think we had time to go through some of those issues that you were talking about. What are the lower court issues that are leading up to right now, or that we should be looking at?
There are some. There are a couple of cases. I believe one is in the Fourth Circuit in Virginia that looks at the use of race neutral policies in a competitive K-12 school. I'd have to refresh my recollection as to maybe a couple of the others. But the point being that these cases will be teed up by the other side. And I do know that a couple of lawyers have already indicated their intention to bring these kinds of cases. So people who have been in these higher ed affirmative action cases are now teeing up another round of cases about the use of what we would think of as being racially neutral, in the sense that they don't explicitly rely on race.
And that's what you were talking about before.
Yes. So even if they're saying, okay, we're not going to use racial classifications as, we're going to admit this Black person because they're Black, or this, Asian person because they're Asian. But if we have devised a policy that is intending to bring in people of color under the guise of racial neutrality, even if we have a race-conscious purpose, those cases could also be challenged in the lower courts, are being challenged in the lower courts, and that might be the next round of cases. And so I only say that just for awareness purposes. One thing I do want to say, and it goes back to the question that that you asked about how to respond. I do think it's important to make sure, even though I've tried to kind of provide an analysis of where we are, that we also hold the line. Like, we shouldn't just yield to this. Like, we shouldn't assume that this is going to happen. And we should hold steady on the importance of inclusion and justice in access to higher education. One of the other things, and I don't remember if I've said this, and if I did, you can stop me. What we lost, decades ago in this fight is a rationale that says we have to remedy past discrimination. The court has said you can't use that for purposes of considering race in higher education admissions. What you can consider is the use of race to create diversity. And so the diversity rationale has been the dominant rationale in these cases because of decisions that happened, a few decades ago. Mm-hmm. And so what we have to make sure that we do now is to say, look, we are going to hold the line in recruitment. We're going to provide ways for students from Newark and students who we think would do, who should be admitted to these institutions. We're going to support them. We're going to do everything that we can to support them. And really just to be intentional about the need to provide supportive services for students, and in ways that are consistent, at least with the spirit of equal protection, if not the letter of equal protection, if that makes sense.
Okay. And thank you. The last, thing that we'll ask you about is on what you said in terms of basically reparations. A reparative justification would not pass constitutional muster. Does that mean that because I know that Ryan, you're very good friends with Ryan Haygood, and he is talking about New Jersey reparations. He was on the show a few weeks ago, specifically talking about reparations in New Jersey. Are you saying that reparations is not constitutional according to existing law or existing interpretations?
Well, there are lots of different ways you can do reparations. I mean, you can have policies that are intended to address the harms of past discrimination. The hook is the specific use of race. So if you were to say, this is going to get me in trouble with Ryan, so maybe I should just be quiet. I mean, I think let's cordon off that part of the conversation, because I think it's actually a different conversation, and I want to make sure I'm not conflating issues in a way that will generate confusion.
Fair enough. Would that be related to the question that I asked earlier about if you're like a descendant of the American slave trade, we will consider you for this, not for any reparative reason, but because you're the descendant of the American slave trade. And we think that this is important to have these perspectives in the same way we would have people who were legacies of the university or legacies of the coal mining, right? Or legacies of the Native American genocide. Like, these are important things. You just can't say it's reparative, but you can have these categories. Is that just the open question that people are going to be asking?
Again, it's a complicated question because the trigger for a lot of these policies is a very specific use of race that attaches to the individual who is receiving the benefit. So if I say I'm going to give you this because you are Black or you are Latina or whatever, that could generate some constitutional problems. But policies that are passed to address the harms of enslavement and prior discrimination, that's totally different. What we're saying is we're going to pass a policy that said, look, there was this grievous racial injustice, and we need to address that by passing policies that provide better transportation, or that provide better educational outcomes, or that provide make sure that we have food. People are not food insecure. There are lots of different ways that would not trigger the issues that I've been describing.
So possibly that might be a way forward for people who are interested in it, right? Like universities or employers or policymakers to actually start to talk about addressing it, but just not be very because even what does it mean to be Black right now, right? Like those definitions have changed over the last 30 years. More specific language may be a possibility forward.
Well, different. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at there are policies that we can use to repair past harm. That is possible. There is a way to do that. And I saw Vivian Cox Fraser's question about the school desegregation case, and that is one way that we can address past harm. Is we have issues of segregation that disadvantages many children in the state. So yes, that is not on the. We're good, Vivian. If you can still hear me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I know that it's past that time. The last question that we're going to ask you, though, is who's your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group?
Can I go old school?
Yes, you can go old school.
I'm going to go super old school.
Okay.
I would say Eric B. and Rakim.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. You already know who Lawrence Ham is.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Organization for Progress.
Yeah. Yes, I'm well aware of who Mr. Ham is. It's nice to see you, Mr. Ham.
And
it's good to see you too, Elsie.
So,
all right, you're on to the next segment.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Again, we always appreciate having you here. We always appreciate when you come on. We definitely want to have you back.
Thanks for the invitation. It's great to see you all.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. That was part of our another part of our segment on this, and we love. We really are going to be going back and forth over these policies for as long as we can to get different perspectives, and we value them, right, very much. Larry, definitely wanted to have you on in this earlier to ask from a lot of your perspective in terms of movement, because there's one thing that I definitely wanted to add to this conversation, as I'd actually added a lot of it, but when it comes to affirmative action and a mass movement, you always talk about there has to be something connected to it, right? What are your thoughts before we move on to the segment that comes up next?
Is that to me or to Zaid?
To you as well.
Okay. Well, what I think about this is not going to make some people happy. We had this discussion on the POP meeting last night, just a little bit at the end of the meeting. And one of the members, when we asked people what did they feel about the Supreme Court decision, the first response from one of the members was, elections have consequences. these horrendous decisions that have been handed down in the last 12 months, I don't know all of them by memory, but the ones that stand out right now would be the decision on affirmative action that ends affirmative action in college admissions, the decision to, in effect, nullify President Biden's student debt reduction program. And the third one would be, that stands out in my mind, is the Dobbs decision that ended Roe v. Wade. These decisions are the decisions of a majority on the court, all an ultra-conservative supermajority of 6 members, all appointed by Republicans. Clarence Thomas was appointed by Bush the Elder. I believe Alito and Scalia may have been appointed by Bush the Lesser. And finally, Trump got an unprecedented 3 appointments to the Supreme Court. And Elise really explained that very well. And, you know, I'm just going to say it. It's the consequence of the stolen election of 2016 that enabled Donald Trump to sit in the White House. I mean, Trump literally appointed 3 of the 6 of the supermajority. Obama had 1 appointment, as Elise said, that was blocked by the Senate because the Senate had majority control at that time. They blocked the appointment of Merrick Garland, who is now the U.S. attorney. President Obama had asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg to retire because she was up in age, but more than that, she was seriously ill, fighting cancer. She refused to retire. And so she passed away during the Trump administration, and Trump got to fill that seat. He put in Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. So elections have consequences. That's why, you know, I'm going to say it right now so that nobody wonders what is on my mind. I am going to support whoever the Democratic Party nominee is for president. The Supreme Court that we have now is the result of a right-wing fascist and racist movement in this country. They attempted to seize power both electorally and violently. And the irony is now that the leader of the attempted coup of January 6, 2021 is now the leading candidate for president on the Republican side. And in some polls, leads the presumptive nominee, President Biden, for the Democratic Party. I think it's absolutely essential that these Republicans be handed a resounding defeat in the fall, that the House must be taken back from them. And by the way, their road to power to seize the House of Representatives came right through the state of New York, next door. New York lost 5 congressional seats, the Democrats in New York State. We need to hold on to the White House. We need to get back the House, and we need to expand the majority in the Senate.
So you're talking about a political decision that is, we just need to, if Biden is the nominee, support Biden. If, like, whoever's the Democratic nominee, support them.
That's my position. That's now, look, wait a minute.
I'm asking.
I'm speaking for myself now. And I know there are people that want to support a third party candidate. That's your right. There are third parties that run in every election. But the question is, who can stop the fascists? Who who has the electoral strength. Here's a guy that stole an election, did not win the popular vote when he was elected, was defeated, was impeached twice, indicted twice, and now he is the leading candidate by almost 30 points in his party. So how are you going to stop them? They are trying to seize power. So the objective must be to stop them from seizing power. Now, does that mean we agree with everything the Democrats want? No. I supported Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders ran in the Democratic primary. He didn't get the nomination. He supported Biden. He asked all his delegates to support Biden. So I'm not saying Biden per se, because I want to see some kind of democratic process. I think it's a shame that they won't have any debates. But be that as it may, once the primary is over, whoever the primary winner is, whoever is the Democratic Party nominee, that's the person I'm going to support, because that's the person that's going to have the strength, if these people can be beat, to beat them, and not just beat them for the White House, but take back the House and expand the majority in the Senate, so we don't have this bifurcated Senate that we have now, where we only have a majority by virtue of the fact that the vice president can sit as the president of the Senate and can vote when there's a tie vote. You know, this situation is very serious. And I know there are a lot of people, that are disenchanted. Look, I ran as a third party candidate.
Larry, we lost you. We lost you again. All right, so we have more guests. This was supposed to be DJ Rhino and the State of Hip Hop at this point. DJ Rhino is not
on. Am I still on?
You are on right now.
Am I still on?
You just got back in. You popped out for a little bit. But we are expanding this section, and we have Vivian Cox from the Urban League. We have Professor Carter from Seton Hall University, and we have Naseed Gifted, who is the creator of Jason. He is a brilliant comic book creator and also a vice principal at Science Park High School, and he's also he's making a cameo appearance today to talk about the Kickstarter project of the comic book creation, but is also going to engage in the conversation that we're having. But we're going to take time to really talk about what he's doing before 8 as well. So we decided to continue this as well.
So I just want to ask a question real quick. Hey, hi, Professor. Hi, Ms. Cox, and hi, Principal Naseed. Chairman was just talking about how, the upcoming elections. And I think Professor Carter, she always is really strong on civics and helping us to get, helping us as a community to understand civics more and why we have to participate in at every, and meaning local elections, every part, Democratic meetings and so on, Republican meetings, whatever your choice may be, but we have to participate. So it's nice because we have we have a professor, a principal, and the Urban League. And I just envision if we were strategically moving, as we strategically move forward. Now, see, how can we get a series of comic books that help starting at a young age? That you remember, I'm born in '67, something like a Schoolhouse Rock, but it would begin helping young people understand the importance of engagements in civics and how our government works. And then using the Urban League is a big platform, and you have your conferences every year, and I'm sure you leave from that conference with a list of things we have to do for this year. And getting back to what I said about Professor Carter, we know that civics is no longer in the school system. So what do we do Is it open our church doors, open our different halls? We have to begin to help people understand that this has to be all a movement on all fronts. It just can't be this or that. It has to be all things. So I don't know. One of you could start, and in just this thing, how can we all help each other, help our community?
I think I'm just going to jump in here. It needs to be everybody all the way. Pressure on the school district to make sure it goes back. And I must say this, in the segregated South, and I said this before on the show, Black teachers in the segregated South were teaching those students who later migrated up here and made it possible for there to be a Black this and a Black that. And those teachers were teaching them how to be citizens when they couldn't even be second-class citizens. And the churches were involved in citizenship. So everybody has to be involved. But let me just tell you this. We're waiting as usual to the last minute, right? We should have been active in this for every election in between, but people slept on it. And so one of the things that have been happening in the Republican Party is they've been looking at taking over state legislative houses for the last 20, 25 years, right? And actually getting people on the courts, whatever courts they can get on, in the federal courts at every system for the last 10, 20 years. No matter if it's a Democratic president or Republican president, their game plan has been in effect for a very long time. And we're behind the ball as usual. So we got a lot to do in a short period of time. The election in 2024 is like 2024 is when in 6 months, right? And we're going to wait. And the other thing we're going to do, we're going to say, let's get people out to vote. But we're not going to explain to them why they should vote, who they should vote for, and get the behind the scenes on terms of who's actually representatives. Because it could be a Democrat acting like a Republican. And if you don't think so, look at Mr. Manchin in West Virginia. And the other woman whose name I can't escape, who used to be with Ralph Nader, who's in, I think she's from Arizona right now. So it's not just voting, it's understanding why you're voting. And we have not been sustaining, as James and Tume used to say, we don't have sustained indignation. We stopped. We didn't do that before. And, going back to affirmative action, and I was hoping that I can come in on that part, because I think that, affirmative action has a lot to do with this. I know it was been good for some of us. It was good for me, but I know it's not been good for all of us. And one of the things it moved us from a we community to a me community. And a lot of things we're suffering is because we decided that we no longer need to be we need to be me. And so now we're in the situation. So you're absolutely right, Donna. It's about what are we going to do now? And we don't have a lot of time. And so what Larry proposes, for all intent and purpose, we shouldn't have to just go along to get along. We should have had a game plan a long time ago. We're late. We're late. And it doesn't mean we should give up. We never give up. Our ancestors didn't give up. If they gave up, we wouldn't be here. And I can tell you, if we were them, we probably wouldn't be here either, the way we act. Yeah. So we need to get on the ball. We don't have a lot of time. For the professor or the teacher who has a comic books, I do have, and I have something called America Votes. I can share with you. You can use that as a baseline if you haven't, but I think comic books are a good way to get the word out really quickly and not just about voting. Every time I hear people, let's vote, get them out to vote, but don't explain to them why they should be voting. And you don't have this sustained operation. So it's very hard to be strategic when you got 6 months between all hell breaks loose. So I just want to get that out. So
Vivian Cox, I know that you have some things to say as well.
Well, I guess I'm an affirmative action baby. So Jonathan, you were talking about how when you went to college, well, same thing happened to me. They have buses come and take us from, I grew up in DC in the urban, little school, and they had buses that came and took us to different colleges on tours, encouraged us to apply because they wanted to increase the number of Black students in the schools. And I'll say that the kids that aren't getting in right now to like Harvard and Yale, and I went to Yale. I mean, my scores wouldn't get me 5 miles to Yale right now, or Princeton, or anywhere else, because at the time they understood that we had suffered from lack of preparation. We didn't have resources in our homes and our families. They weren't giving us test prep programs and all these things like that. So right now, I think I agree with everybody about being engaged and getting people engaged in the political process at every level, and that's certainly something we do. But I also think we have to talk about the third grade reading scores in Newark. And what does that say for how we're preparing our children to compete? So when I grew up, my parents always said, you got to be twice as good as white people. I'm sorry, that's just what they told us. And we worked hard and we did it. But I'm saying, like, we're losing some of that. And right now with the COVID and the impact it's had on our kids, how far they are behind, we really have to, I just feel like we have to bear down in protecting and preparing our children, as well as also the protection. And also, even when they talk about system change and voting and, who's in office and the policies affecting them, most times when you have systems change and you want policies, you get the policies and you open the door, but you have to be able to push people through that door, which is, I'm going to say, when the civil rights movement came, something what the Urban League did in the 70s with Whitney and Young, he went to a corporation and said, let these people get jobs. We weren't over prepared and underemployed at that time. But now we have to also be on the ground around the preparation of our people. And I agree with what you said, Professor Carter, just about, I think, integration, as well as affirmative action has taken away that sense of we. Many people, can get their kids in private schools, but the kids that are in public schools, they're kind of left. And also the families are struggling. So I definitely agree in, a collective approach to this. And I think it has to be, collective around the supports that families need, because it's hard for people. There's a whole theory around scarcity and how it affects the cognitive development of children's brains even. And so when families are in scarce situations and they're struggling, everything like that, you can try to get their attention on a lot of things. But if we're in survival mode, it's hard to even if you want to educate people on voting, it's hard for them to make that connection when they're trying to survive. So I definitely think it's the holistic approach has to be taken as not just I think the political approach, but we certainly have spent time on the political approach as a people, I would say, and have lost sight on some of the economic and educational approaches. And the other issue I would say with this decision, if you look at like the philanthropic organizations where they're giving money, and even if you look at the HBCUs, how much philanthropy they get versus how much, the white institutions get, that's a disparity that needs to be addressed as well. Because if we want to get our kids into schools and they're going to HBCUs or whatever, they don't have the resources at those schools either. So it's a multi-level that we have to do around, empowering our community around certainly the consequences of the Supreme Court decision and affirmative action. But I was watching something, they were talking about, the Supreme Court justices used to be slaveholders and they were making decisions about slavery. Suddenly we think the Supreme Court is here to make decisions on the benefit of our people. They're not. And so I think that what we've fallen down on is understanding that we're the adults and we have to make the pathways for our children. And we have to own that. Instead of thinking other institutions are going to save us, thinking affirmative action going to give us an education. I think that's part of the problem. Like we think like, oh, now the door is open, we can just walk in. But the question is, as soon as that door open, we see right now it can shut down again and shut down all of us.
I think that really, whenever it comes to solutions, it's always like, there are so many different pathways that need to be tried at the same time.
Sure.
I think that affirmative action was good for what it did. I think that it's being gone will hurt in certain instances, even though the overwhelming majority of our students who go to college aren't affected by that in terms of the elite colleges that were brought up. But we see what's going on in Missouri, where they're literally taking away scholarships from Black kids.
Wisconsin.
Missouri, Dred Scott got away.
Right, and we're looking at the equal, there were equal opportunity programs that exist at Rutgers, that exist all over the country at state schools that actually gave money and opportunities to kids so that they could be first generation in, et cetera. So that we're conscious about those things as well. I do want to bring in the limited time we have left, I do want to bring Naseed Gifted in to first weigh in on the conversation, and then let's segue into a huge plug for the incredibly good work that he's doing. We're going to get him back to talk more about Afrofuturism. We're going to have an entire segment where we could deal with that and what's going on. But weigh in on this conversation and in your educator's hat, and then maybe in your Afrofuturist hat, because Afrofuturism often tries to deal with problems that we look at today, but in a different way. So as a principal, can you weigh in?
So, Principal, did we give you a whole new storyline? Tell us.
Mr. Gifted.
Revolutionaries in them stories.
He does.
You got to put you're on mute, Principal. Can you unmute him? Can you unmute him?
I can't unmute him. You're unmuted on your end, Mr. Gifted. You're muted on your end. Now you're on.
There you go.
All right. First of all, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
I'm not sure if you can hear me because
we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. Because my connection, I'm really getting like every other word, so I'm listening hard, and I know there's a real powerful conversation that's going around, affirmative action and the policy that's in place, but also I was also listening, and I was listening to
Principal, before you start, sometimes if you cut your video off and just talk, see if that gives you a better connection.
Yeah, true. Now we can you hear us?
I can hear you, but it's still choppy. Okay. But just to reiterate some of the stuff that you guys were talking about, with regards to what I wanted to pull out was the civics process and how we engage young people using graphic media to be able to do that. So using comics and various other mediums that's highly engaging. If we look at adolescents and how adolescents learn, we look at how we start with picture books with words, and then they and then we take away the pictures. But the thing that I've noticed, and one of the things that I've researched, is that when we get into the higher ups of learning more abstract material, your maths and your sciences and everything, the fact that you are able to develop these mental models are key for them to have a certain level of understanding versus a surface level of understanding, and being able to use graphic media like comics or any other thing that has been a way to be able to engage young people on a higher level, even adults. When we talk about English as a second language learners, when they are translating and first learning the language, they're using these graphic medias to be able to engage them, to be able to learn the language and everything. And then also been looking at research with regards to how we're doing that with advanced placement and college courses, to be able to use that to be able to engage and retention. So it's not even only about engagement, but it's also about retention. So when we talk about the research that I've been looking at, talks about you have two case studies where you're looking at individuals who are studying via textbook and using a graphic media to be able to learn, various concepts in text. When they test, one thing has happened. One of the things that the research states is that the test scores have been similar in the fact of the amount of material that has been retained. But when we talk about the actual textbooks and everything and the actual retention of that material, it's almost like the whole typewriter thing. So once they get to the end of it and they get assessed on it, that's the end of that learning and that's the end of that knowledge. But when we looked at and engaging in the graphic media, one thing has also occurred is that the retention levels is higher, and then they go into a deeper understanding of the content, because one of the things that are coming out of this is that they are able to develop, they can see it visually, right? So, using Garner's multiple intelligence, we have a number of individuals who are visual learners. And because they are visual learners, they can be able to see and obtain, that material that way and being able to engage in that. So I say all of this. I'm sorry.
we're running to the end of this section, so we just to plug the. You're doing some really good work, like amazing work, on your particular project. Can you
Yes.
talk to us about that? Because I know that we reached the end of this particular segment, even though we are going to be continuing it in the
Oh
coming
yeah,
weeks.
sure. Not a problem. So right now, currently, we are running a campaign for Jason, the Rose That Grew from the Concrete. It's an Afrofuturism graphic novel series, which is an extension of our PB Soldier graphic novel, which was award-winning and everything. And then this is also a way that we've used to be able to engage young people and adults in the STEM fields. So Jason, in this series, is an oncologist who just discovered the cure for cancer, and I use a number of fact finding, sound therapy and things that actually uses some of the research that's out there to be able to tell the story. But because she's actually come with the cure for cancer, that actually leads her down a different path where big pharmaceutical companies, as well as she gets into it with the Renaissance City trooper, where there is a incident where there is two troopers that are shot, and she's accused of that, and then that kind of takes us on a whole journey of how she navigates this whole world, and then discover and do some self-discovery. It actually engages with poetry and everything else far in between, to be able to tell this narrative of how this oncologist has went to a fugitive state, but also kind of still loops in how STEM and STEAM is all a part of this whole journey.
So what you have a Kickstarter. Can you briefly explain what that is? I just want you to be able to plug that, because I know that we're over time.
Yeah, so Kickstarter is just kind of really what it is. It's really just it's a Kickstarter. It's like a jump start to an actual project. So it's a crowdfunding campaign that allows individuals who have unique projects to be able to gain traction, gain viewers, and also gain funding to be able to put a project together. So we actually have Jason, the Rose That Grew from the Concrete Part 1 already finished. We were looking to put it into print, and then also extend the actual series into various other avenues, as far as actually developing an activity book that goes into oncology and computer analyst, because that is what the character does within the book. Also, we're looking to engage young people and understand that these career paths are highly attainable, and how to actually be a part of that. All right,
so thank you so much. Can you put your link in the comments?
Yes, I will. I definitely will. So what we definitely would like for you guys to do is, if you can definitely share this information, if you can let others know that we are doing this. This also ties into our launch that we do with KimFest every year, where we celebrate Black animation, gaming, and comic book creators. That's going to be in September 23rd and 24th at Cityplex Theater.
All right, thank you. And so what we're doing, we're getting ready to go to the next segment. We're going to continue the affirmative action debate, and we'll schedule or conversation, and we'll schedule that as well, so we can have more time to work through these. But for everyone, for all of our guests, for Professor Carter and Vivian Fraser and Mr. Gifted, very quickly and briefly, who is the hip hop artist that you are listening to now, or just rocking with, or inspired by? You can even give me your favorite, individual or group.
Before they answer, Jonathan, let me just say this very quickly, because since we're in this creative, political, legal kind of space, we got to acknowledge for a moment the late, great John Lewis, who was not just a freedom fighter, but he was also into comic art, right? He would love the conversation, and he would love what Naseed is doing.
Wow.
Right? So I just wanted to lift up that ancestor. That's how I ride. You know how I get down. Y'all go ahead and answer your question.
Okay.
All right, Naseed. Naseed, who are you listening to?
What am I listening to?
Yes, sir.
Right at the moment, I'm not listening to anything, but
Okay.
I still engage with Talib Kweli.
Okay.
That's one of my artists. And lately, I've actually been listening to the Black Panther soundtrack. You know, Wakanda Forever. So I like a number of those tracks.
All right. Well, thank you, and
Thank
appreciate
you.
you, and gonna have to have you back. All right,
All
Professor
right.
Carter.
Professor Carter,
Professor Carter.
you're on mute.
I said, not really anybody in particular today, but Pete Seeger's "Which Side Are You On?" Which is done by a lot of hip hop artists. You know, asking basically to the people, which side are you on? Are you on the side of the people, or are you carrying the ball for the white supremists? Which side are you on?
Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Professor. We'll see you soon. Vivian Cox from the Urban League.
I'm going old school. I'm listening to Aretha. I'm sorry.
All right.
R-E-S-P-E-C-T.
Like hip hop? No, and we're gonna do a
All
No,
right.
I'm
Just
not,
know
I'm not
that.
saying no to hip hop. I'm just saying lately
Well, that was a rap.
I've been listening
R-E-S-P-C-T.
I've been listening to
You got that off. You got that off, Ms.
school.
Cox. R-E-S-P-C-T. That was her rap.
That's what it is.
All right, cool. So we got Aretha Franklin. All right, cool. Well, thank you very much.
And
Thank you very
real
much.
quick
We
before
don't
you,
have-
Ms. Cox, before before the Urban League does their annual, can you come back and prepare us, and then maybe we'll have you on before and after?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Cool.
Love to.
Thank you.
And again, thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, so we are about to be in the Payne report with Congressman Donald Payne. We'd like to thank our guests on that the segments before in terms of just dealing with affirmative action and the repercussions of it, and what some of the thoughts on it were. Also, I'm glad that Naseed Gifted was on as well, because we always appreciate having him on. He's a very creative, talented artist who is a leader within a creative leader in our community. We always appreciate that. So we have the Payne report with Congressman Donald Payne. Welcome to the Payne report.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Look at that beard. I'm loving that, sir.
The beard and the glasses.
Mm-hmm. Don't get
All
ready.
right.
Put your seat on. He coming in the spirit of Malcolm.
You got the
Put 'em
cool
back on.
glasses. You got the cool glasses on.
The who? The who glasses?
Those cool
I
glasses.
said the spirit of
Oh.
Malcolm.
Oh, thank you.
I said those glasses are cool.
Thank you. Now I can see.
Also, in the kind of in the spirit of hip hop, they remind me of a more modern version of gazelles from back in the day.
Mm.
Oh yeah, I remember those.
Gazelles.
Right. They look cool, man. They look cool.
Thank
Congressman, it's been a busy week. I know I seen you up early in the morning with the incident that happened down at the port. Been a challenging week. So what say you, sir?
you. Yeah, just really saddened, devastated by what transpired at the docks yesterday, and to lose two of our bravest from Newark is really shocking. Now I think it's been quite some time since we've had that happen, and
Right.
it really has just devastated the entire community.
And in case people don't know, there was a fire at the port on a ship that was containing cars. Firefighters from Newark and Elizabeth went out. Many were injured, but two firefighters from Newark in the same unit were killed. I know it's early, but when people were talking about how they weren't prepared for a fire on a ship with cars, right? And how that was a unique danger that they weren't prepared for. You're on the Transportation Committee for Congress, right? And you've done a lot of work in the infrastructure bill and on transportation. Is this something that is and we're also dealing with the ports. Is this something that is federal in nature in terms of both the problem that costs these men their lives and solutions to that? Is this part of the dialogue that's going on right now in terms of, is there a federal aspect to this?
And just so we stop saying, it's firefighter Wayne Brooks and firefighter Augusto Akabu. So firefighter Brooks and firefighter Augusto Akabu, Wayne and Augusto.
It's great,
Yeah.
but dangerous work.
Yeah, it being, I'm not sure, in reference to it being a federal in nature. I know that in terms of my work, Homeland Security, and my dealings with first responders. It's unfortunate this happened, and what we're learning is there hasn't been much experience with this type of fire, and that probably had something to do with the outcome. So I'm sure it's something now that they're going to look into and try to probably create some training around that circumstance. It's unfortunate. You learn from these issues as well. Someone had to lose their life is tragic. But now there's some experience with a fire like this, and I'm sure the follow-up meetings in reference to what happened and what transpired and what they could have probably done differently will be definitely addressed. And I would assume that the federal government would be involved in some manner, but to what extent, I'm not sure.
And Congressman, it seems like the port, when you go down there and you visit the port, it seems like it's so self-contained. Like they have, when people come down there to work, they have everything they need right there. And that's one of the things. So they don't have a internal fire department?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so. I think they rely on the services. I believe the Port Authority has a fire department, and but it was a call in Newark, so naturally they were going to respond.
And also, I think when in the news reports that I read, and one of the not really a complaint, but one of the statements from the mayor was that when Port Authority couldn't deal with it, they had to call Newark and Elizabeth, right? So even if Port Authority had resources, which seems doubtful, they didn't have the resources to be able to deal with that fire because they had to call in both Newark and Elizabeth in order to do that. And I think it's also that particular type of fire started coming up in terms of, there probably has to be some specific training in terms of how to contain fires at the port and things that probably are predictable based on what comes in and out of the port. Cars come in and out of the port all the time, right? There are all sorts of other types of containers that come in and out of the port all the time. How do we deal with different types of fires? It's probably something that needs to be, really studied, not just in Newark, but around the country when these things happen.
Where all our ports are.
Right.
I know
I think that basically the difficulty around the issue was it was on a ship, which made it unusual.
Right.
And so that was the difference in how these are addressed, and there isn't much. I'm sure there wasn't much experience in reference to handling this on ship vis-a-vis the subsequent tragedy.
Right, and they were talking about not just this ship, and cars were supposed to be something unique in terms of fires too, right? Like, and I'm not sure of that. That's just in stuff that I read. that talked about, you're absolutely right in terms of the ships, but also the different types of cargo that could be on different types of ships, and especially the things that are very common to come into the port. It's almost a surprise. Well, I'm glad that the good thing is that there are not many of these fires, right? Apparently, there are not many fires like this, but there's so many ships that come in and out of our ports that it's almost like you would think that, this either doesn't happen. I mean, it's a good thing it doesn't happen more often, but you would think that there would be contingencies in training for ship fires when you have so many ships that come in and out all the time carrying all kinds of cargo.
Well, I mean, we don't know if there is or there isn't. So that's the first thing we have to,
Right.
to determine. So, I wouldn't speak to what I'm trying to say. I wouldn't speak like I know, because I'm not sure, to the extent of what training there is. So, but we will be finding out. That's for sure. This is going to be studied for.
Because we know that there
quite
is the
some time.
water training, because like down in Cape May, for anybody that serves down there, there's a lot of training, more so for emergencies that happen on the water. And so it's interesting how this all folds out, because you see we have the port of Elizabeth, the port of Newark, and then across the water, maybe that you're going to have to maybe put legislation that there may be some contingencies or something where they can respond right from the water, if that would be a little quicker.
Yeah, it's gonna definitely be studied, and try to put something in place so we don't have this happen again.
Clear. And one question that's also just we just had in the last few segments on affirmative action, right? And it seems like the Supreme Court has been handing us L's, right? People said when they struck down Joe Biden's student forgiveness, that was an attack on Black women who have disproportionate student loan debt, and that would have been disproportionately helped. Striking down affirmative action strikes again. Black women are some of the most educated people in the United States, and this seems to strike at that as well. What do you think about what's going on, and what is the Congressional Black Caucus saying? I know I benefited from affirmative action. I know that there are lots of people who benefited from it, who've made their communities better because of it. What are some of the thoughts that are going on with you now on that?
Well, we're actually irate with the tenor in the country, trying to dismantle all the gains and positive action that there have been over the past 50, 60 years. That it's almost like people said, all right, your time is up. Now let's go back, to the good old days, make America great again. And, it is a drill that they have been working for many years and have gotten to the point where they are running their drill. And it is difficult to fight when you have a Supreme Court, one arbiter that you're looking for to, be fair and just about these issues, and that they have become a political entity as well. The Supreme Court is supposed to be the one entity that is not political, and but we see that, and while I'm thinking about it, for this reason alone, Hillary Clinton wouldn't have been as bad as Donald Trump. Had people gone to the polls and supported Hillary Clinton and all those issues they had with her, put those aside and think about what Donald Trump would mean to this country, we wouldn't be in this boat, because Donald Trump wouldn't have been able to name 3 Supreme Court justices.
And what's more, Hillary Clinton would have been able to name at least 2 of the 3.
Right. So sometimes we gotta put down the little issues and think about the bigger picture. But it's going to be a very tough few years over the course of time, because these justices are not old and they're not ready to retire.
Yeah.
They're just getting started.
Yes.
And so and they've stuck their toe in the water, and they haven't gotten burnt, so they're just going to continue. It's going to be one thing after the other, and it's just going to continue to unravel.
Where's the Congressional Black Caucus at on packing the court?
Well, I wouldn't say. I don't think that's a very good term. Packing.
Okay.
I think the term that they
Expanding.
were expanding.
Expanding. Okay.
That's not what we're looking to do. But there are a lot of people that are for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced yet. I see the reasoning for it,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not there yet, because what's going to happen is just what's happening now. Once you expand the court, there's going to be some point in time where the other side, has the upper hand, and it's just going to be just as bad. So,
Well, Congressman, by default, isn't that kind of sort of what they did when they wouldn't allow President Obama to make his appointment?
Absolutely. And for the life of me, I still don't understand how they got away with that. And but I mean, like I said, they're running their drill. They've been working on this plan for 70 years, and they're finally to the point where they're in the position to implement their plan, and it's wreaking havoc on our community. And so, some way, somehow, we have to get hold of these local races and the legislatures in these states, and change the dynamics. So when they're creating these congressional districts, that we don't end up in the boat that we're in now. I mean, it is just going to be devastating over the next few years what this court can potentially, be able to do.
It's interesting. For the last few weeks, I've been pushing ideas of compulsory voting as a form to educate and reform the voting system, right? Like it's been tried in other countries, and because I think that if we had compulsory voting in Newark, in Camden, in Patterson, I think it would fundamentally transform the United States. Because in New Jersey, that means that there would be, like, these states would then start dominating state elections like never before, and it would be bottom up and top down education about voting, about civics. That would have to be done. And there would also be a response that people would have to make, right? I just want us to just start talking about it a little more, so that even though there are many who may disagree with it, I think the conversation's important, because there has to be a massive change in the way we do our politics. We're talking about right now expanding the number of Supreme Court justices because of what's happening. We're talking about right now making sure that we control certain houses on a state level and local positions, because those local positions we know can overturn elections. But at the same time, we have such high voter apathy, and there's such a lack of education that, and that combined with the way we vote is voter turnout is all private, right? So taxes are collected by the government. How we spend our taxes, that's really determined by private individuals who get other private individuals out to vote for their particular private interest, right? And I think just thinking about that a little more, there may be actions, like if we're willing to think about expanding the Supreme Court, maybe we should think about giving local communities the right to have compulsory voting.
Well, okay. Look, we have to figure out how we get our community to understand the importance of voting. I mean, if it's not clear enough now, you not voting, what the ramifications are. I mean, what has to happen? What has to happen? I mean, they're talking about deciding whether we should have the right to vote or not. I mean, to have to vote every 25 years on giving Black people the right to vote in this country is unnerving. It's ridiculous.
And you're talking about the Voting Rights Act, right? Like,
correct.
The Voting Rights Act has to be extended, or it has to be renewed every 25 years. And even in
this 25-year cycle is dangerous.
Right. Well, I'm not sure, but what I think what happened was to get the Voting Rights Act, they probably had to put a time frame on it, because they would have never gotten enough people to vote for it as a permanent standing right. So they compromised and did it for 25 years. I really have to look into, how it was determined that was the number of years that, that should stand. But it should have been a permanent right. Once you're American citizens, should have been a permanent right. And I don't understand for the life of me, why every 25 years we have to, think about, should we let them or shouldn't we? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's scary.
But I think that it becomes compounded in that on midterm elections, we don't vote, right? And a lot of the small elections, we don't vote.
Right.
And I think that idea of compulsory voting, like if we can force you to pay taxes, and I'm not even talking about criminal penalties for voting. It's if you didn't vote, then you have to see a 30-minute video, right? Like that educates you on what these positions are. And you have to just acknowledge you saw it, right? And maybe that will be how you renew your licenses, or the stuff that you get from when you need city services. They'll be like, hey, you need to watch this video, and then we'll help you out, right? So it doesn't even have, or pay a fine if you want to. You don't want to watch a video, pay a fine, right? But there should be ways to just spur an understanding of this, because it's a crisis level in our community, right? In terms of low voter turnout. And if Newark had the power to pass certain legislation that would allow or Essex County, right? Even if we did it countywide, right? Essex County could pass compulsory voting, right? And Camden, right, could pass compulsory voting. The amount, if everyone in Newark voted, that would transform power in the whole state of New Jersey, right? It would overnight.
Yeah, but how do you get to compulsory voting? People have to vote on that.
Right, and they would, and the legislature would probably have to change certain state laws that would allow that, right? So I think
Jonathan, I really, Jonathan, I really appreciate you pushing this too, and pushing this conversation. But one of the things that we need to look at is that this kind of decision, let's say folks started to agree with you and tried to make it happen.
Right.
That no good bastard racist fascist court would block that.
Maybe, right? Because you at least do what the Black Panthers say and heighten the contradiction. Because the
Black Panther Party called for a national united front against fascism. That's what the Black Panther Party did.
Right, but part of it is heighten the contradictions, right? Like they have made statements about voting rights that says we should let the states decide, right? They have been defending certain levels of states' rights, which is the whole thing about, right?
Right.
They're giving states a lot more latitude to do things that aid in voter suppression, which is where we are now, right? So they would have to start contradicting themselves and be like, well, you can't do this, but you can do this, right? So yeah, they'll probably do it, but at least force them to do it, right? You're like, there's all sorts of things that the court will do. And secondly, they would only have to block it after it starts getting done. And I think just that process, right? Like you're saying fascists would oppose it. Yes, let them. And then people would actually understand, why are you opposing compulsory voting? Because why aren't black people it would be toward black and brown people in these cities to compulsory vote, but you see white supremacists would go crazy, right? That's what you're predicting. And that's good. I mean, I'd love to see, because people would then start to recognize that who doesn't want you to vote? Who's really opposing these things?
Yeah, I don't
need to hear this.
I don't see where you'd be able to get this done.
And there are other countries that passed it. It's nothing but legislation, and legislation can be challenged, but the state legislature could pass certain things that would allow NORC to experiment with that.
You're saying there's somewhere that has compulsory voting?
There are places in other countries that have compulsory voting, and it's been debated and talked about for the United States. The reason I think that people are we can't conceive of compulsory voting here because voting has always been private, as in like voter turnout, right? Getting people out to vote is always, like the Democrats, the private, right? Public and private, right? Individuals privately do that. That's why money is so important to it, because voting, the get out the vote part, the GOTV part, is always private people doing it. And for the most part, people in power want it that way. Because if we did compulsory voting, that means a whole lot more people would be going to the polls, that now I got to communicate with more people as opposed to the people in my network, right? And then I might have to communicate differently, but for democracy, there's no downside to it. For democracy, especially if you're not having criminal sanctions for it, then there's really no downside to it. You're being forced to watch.
That it totally flies in the face of democracy, because democracy is about choices and your rights to do something. So
there are limits. We pay taxes.
To force someone to have to vote, that flies in the face of everything this country is supposed to stand for. We know they don't stand for it, but I mean, the reality of the matter is like, you're totally contradicting what this whole experiment was about.
Well, I think that the only reason why I would push back against that is that you're not forcing people to vote for a particular person. You could vote for an expletive. You could not like the process and just say F you, right? You're just forcing people to go to the polls and give their opinion. We can force people to take their property, their money, and we don't mind that. We tax people, which the government is forcing themselves to take your property. And compulsory voting, and that doesn't go against democracy, to take taxes, which is your actual property. But to force you to give your opinion, it's just your opinion, right? Like you're not losing anything, right? It's not you're just saying that people should have the freedom to sit home. I'm just saying they can still sit home, but they just have to send a ballot in, right? And the ballot can say anything. The ballot can be an expletive, say F you, they voted. They can write for Mickey Mouse, right? DeSantis wouldn't like that, vote for Mickey Mouse, because apparently he has problems with the mouse down in Florida. But you can vote for Mickey Mouse. You can vote for yourself, right? You just have to say something. So I don't think I think expression is uniquely American, and being forced to give your opinion, because what we spend with your money affects you. And the only thing we're saying is you got to give an opinion. You have to give an opinion about who gets to spend your money.
You know what? But Congressman, if you can recall, when we were younger, voting, in my opinion, it was almost like a holiday, or like we were excited about participating. It was a very engaged event in our community. One and the grassroots way, when you open a poll for those period, like for 6 months in a community, and they get to um, see who the candidates are. It was on the ground. People were walking in neighborhoods. You were doing coffee clutches, and I think that's the part we're missing. Just putting commercials out. That really took away when it was on the ground in the communities, and when people, I mean, it was something that led up to that day, and people were really excited about what their choice was going to be on that day, and they got behind their choice. They put lawn signs out. They did, they did everything, but now it's so just send a check in and catch a commercial. I think those are the things that's taken it away. We need to get back to basics, bring the bring it back into the community, and people will, when you walk past and then the candidate happens to be there. Some of my favorite movies, when they show, when you go back to and you see campaign offices and things like that, and how they were engaged. And even now, I'm watching the Shy, and when they did the campaign season, they did campaign offices, and it's just important. And I think that if people can't know you, touch you, feel you, it's hard for them to really be a part of it, because who says they're watching that channel where the commercial is coming on, and even the things that's coming to the mail, when you get 16 flyers in the mail. No, they want to talk to you. 5 minutes of having somebody's time goes a far way longer than a commercial and a flyer.
True. Very true. Well, I mean, we really have to, as you're saying, re-engage people and get them, to understand how important this is, and to be part of this democracy. To sit on the sidelines and then just complain, doesn't help anything. I mean, democracy is a participation sport, and you have to be in it and engaged. And so, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be flying all over the country, explaining it to people. But we do the best we can with the circumstances that we have. But we're in some really dire straits from time to time in terms of some of these issues.
And what I'm trying to do just with this compulsory voting thing is just get people to talk about it and think about it, right? Like, as in, because the more people who are leaders, who are decision makers, who are politicians, who are like, maybe we need to try this. I think that compulsory voting is revolutionary. I think it's transformative in ways that we have never seen. I think the idea of a bunch of Black and brown people voting in mass as a form of law is something that will scare everybody, right? And I think it will scare Black people because they're like, what's with the compulsory part? Like, that's everybody's reaction, is that's un-American. It will scare the crap out of the fascists who are, it will scare the crap out of people who aren't fascists, but just want to win politics, right? Like, all the people in statewide office who might not want Nork to dominate. And they're like, wait, that's not right. So I think it has the power to scare everyone, but it also has the power to transform society. And I think the first one who bites wins. I think that the first one who bites and understands, like if we had compulsory voting, Ras Baraka could be governor. In North Camden, I think those things, I think that could happen, right? Like, in a way that is real. I think that it would spark national debate about voting. I think it's perfectly constitutional, especially if there's no criminal penalty to it, right? If there's more like an educational penalty to it, it's just much more about like push, right? So would it be constitutionally challenged? Of course. If there's no criminal penalty, if there's really just a minor fine or education, you have to watch a video. If it's certain things like that, great. But that idea, if it becomes the force of law, then a lot of people are going to do it simply because it's the force of law. And it's not bad because it's just giving your opinion.
Okay. Well, John, you get it done. And we'll
I need help. That's what I'm asking.
Next month. Next month you'll have it all done. And
but the question is, does it sound compelling?
No.
Oh, why not? What's the issue? Like, just let me know. Let me know. Because as a good debate coach, I always want to know what the flaws in the argument are so that we can answer those questions.
Total argument is flawed.
Explain.
It's unconstitutional. Period. It's just unconstitutional.
In what way?
And that's how this backward ass court would definitely roll with that.
Right, but
I hear where you go. I love what you. I know where you go with this. You want to sharpen the contradictions. I love that shit.
Right, and the point, right, is that they've ruled that states can do this. They not do this, but they ruled that states can set laws. Like states can force you not to. In Atlanta and in Georgia, states can say you can't give out water. You can't give out water at the polls. You can limit the number of people who vote by making it so that you take away the voting booths in particular places. All that's okay. All this turn of the voting rights okay. But compulsory voting, forcing people to come out and give their opinion, that's unconstitutional. They gotta show and prove something on that.
Well,
like,
the key word there, John, is force.
Well, like, here's the thing. They're forcing you not to give water. You can't give water. You go to jail for giving water. You don't go to jail for voting or not voting, right? And that's why I'm saying in terms of constitutionality, courts have allowed many restrictions and criminal penalties on voting. Like those are all like, we have a lot of rules and regulations around voting that sanction criminal penalties and stop people from doing certain things. Okay. They'd have to do a lot of real there's nothing explicit that says it's unconstitutional. We know that they might interpret it as such, right? But their reading of the Constitution right now says that states control our voting rules. That's what we stay out of it. States control it unless it's a violation of rights. What right gets violated? I don't know, because you're not taking away anyone's life, liberty, or property, or even if you did have a minor fine and you could displace that with time, we take taxes. We take away people's property for taxes. We have all sorts of things we can level fines for. Like if your grass is not high enough, they can fine you, right? If you got a car parked in a different place, they can fine you, right? So there are all kinds of things that we open up for people being able to find that are perfectly constitutional. Okay. So
are we gonna spend the whole Payne report going down this?
No, not at all. Not at all. I was just the reason why I was asking that is for real. Like, you know how sometimes we go back and forth, and I really
is this the John report or the Payne report?
It's the Payne report. It is yours, right? It is yours, right? So
you came ready.
I can't tell.
I appreciate you humoring me, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
I just don't see the feasibility of it in the climate in which we find ourselves right now. We can't even get people compulsory. We can't even get them to do it now. Mm-hmm. So, I hear what you're saying, but I think it's I think that's a long way out, and I don't see it working here. I don't.
At some point, we're changing the subject right now, but as long as you're thinking about it, then I'm happy. Right? Just keep it in the back of your head. Have a conversation with someone about it. But it's all good. So what?
It's way in the back of my head.
So what else? What else is going on in DC?
Well, actually, I've been home for the last 2 weeks in the district. We have district work week, and been attending different functions in the district, and have been talking to constituents and different things, and just very proud. Yesterday we secured another $7 billion for the Gateway Tunnel project, and I was able to help make that happen. So very delighted about that, and the project is moving on, and I'm continuing to my efforts in making sure that minorities are in the mix on this multi-year project. This project is people are going to make careers off of this project. It is a 10, 11, 12-year project. It's the largest infrastructure project in the country right now. Wow. And might be the largest one in the next 2 decades. I mean, it's that big, that serious, that major. And so I am working on making sure that minority companies are getting a piece of this project. Talking to the Gateway Development Corporation, Chris Calori, I had a meeting with him yesterday and talked about, Black companies even being prime, the prime contractors on some of these projects. And so, the issues around the limits on, salary and wealth that preclude Black people from, participating in some of these projects. So we're looking to tear down the barriers that keep minorities out of being able to bid and get some of these contracts. I mean, just think just one piece, not even a lot, $7 billion yesterday that we allocated. And so, we anticipate the project will be completed in 2035.
Wow.
And then that's just the new tunnel. And then they will start to rehab the 2 older tunnels. So we need this one tunnel just to get to the point where we can start rehabbing the other 2. So we're creating this one so we can fix the other 2.
Yeah, and it's this climate change beats up on these railroad tracks and tunnels. And no, the Gladstone branch has been down. Why? It's because of the heat. You from one extremity, whether it's the extreme heat or the extreme cold, it just gives the transportation system a hard way to go.
Well, the tunnels are 100 years old, first of all. And secondly, Superstorm Sandy really decimated those 2 tunnels. Salt water got in those tunnels and flooded them. And if you know anything about salt water and electrical equipment, they don't mix. And so there's a lot of damage to those tunnels, major cracks and all kinds of things that need dramatic amount of repair. And so, creating this 3rd tunnel will help ease the traffic as well. But you need a tunnel going each direction. You can't have just one tunnel. So, I'm just really delighted because, a lot of people didn't think we'd ever get this off the ground. And, I've been since arriving in Congress, I've been pushing and fighting, along with other people. But, I really kind of made it my mission. I actually was able to get the first $900 million for the project started back in like 2017. But, now, that we have President Biden, really was the game changer. He believed in it. He's a definite supporter of Amtrak and long commuter rail and all of that. So it's good to have somebody that understands it and believes in it, and which makes the total difference in whether a project like this would go forward or not.
And even at the airport like a whole different airport.
Terminal A is nice.
Ooh.
That was a great project, and they're going to start on Terminal 2. What is it?
B.
B. No, well, that's Terminal 1,
the
new one. So it'll be Terminal 2.
Wait. So they're building brand new So they're building not just new Terminal A, but they're building brand new terminals for B and C too.
And
I don't know. I know there's
rental car.
I know there's another terminal coming behind this one they just built, but beyond that, I'm not sure.
And a new rental car hub too. So yeah, Newark Airport you just might want to just go hang out at the airport.
no, my goodness, right? Like Terminal A is really nice, right?
Yeah.
Now the question you talked about, like what you're doing with minority business owners. We talked about this a lot, and this is one of those civics things, right? Like when you get into the weeds, when you're actually doing these really specific things. There's the bill that's passed, right? So there's this money that's out there, but how it's spent, who it goes to, making sure you have rules to have minority contractors. From what I gather, you're saying that's where we are right now, right? Like we're in the part where you're trying to make sure that the rules for this and the people it's supposed to go to and the companies that the black startups, right? Companies can literally, it can create wealth much in the same way that Maynard Jackson did in Atlanta and building the Atlanta airport.
Right.
What you have talked about is doing the same thing and having that level of control with minority businesses.
Right. See, unfortunately, the thing that's different, we have the Port Authority as opposed to the city owning the actual airport. So the Port Authority, maintains and runs that. So it's a little bit different. But the gentleman that is head of the Port Authority, Rick Cotton, has been one of the most genuine CEOs that I've seen in terms of, wanting to have people participate. Now, what happens in most of these cases is, you'll get the guy up top that believes in the vision, wants it to happen, but the closer you get to the work is where the people don't play by the rules. The CEO set out the guidelines and what the goals should be, and you work your way down, and you got a foreman on the job that won't let the black company just sweep up over there. So what I've been trying to talk to these CEOs about is their follow through to make sure that the people under them are not just yesing him to death and implementing his vision, because a lot of people have really noble intentions, but it's the people under them that don't follow through on that goal. So I'm having those conversations with them to make sure that they follow through, to make sure that their people, their organizations, and the prime contractors that they're using are actually implementing what should be happening. So I've been talking to them. I've sat down with Rick Cotton. I'm also sat down, like I said, with the Gateway Development Corporation, and trying to hold their feet to the fire and let them know I'm not going away. I'm watching, and they're going to have to show me where the participation is. It's so difficult, to get everybody to follow the whole plan through. Problem with the labor unions. A lot of these companies say, they ask for the people, but they take who the labor unions send them, and that's who they send. And sometimes it's been difficult for African Americans to break through into some of these unions. So, I mean, there's just so many pitfalls and things prohibiting us from moving forward that it is just a constant battle. I talked to the former mayor of New Orleans. I can't remember his name offhand, but he is running.
One.
Who?
Marques-Aquil?
No, not Mario.
Okay.
His sister was a senator too. Anyway, he's running the whole construction around the infrastructure bill for the president, and so I'm meeting with him in order to, what happens is you get this money, and you start and you hear about it. Okay, yeah, we're doing this, doing that, and then some point in time you go, hey, I was waiting for you to let me know where this money is and how we, utilize it. And then they say, oh, you know what? Darn it, it's all gone. There's no more money left. I'm trying to get on this thing before they come to me and say there's no money left. So I'm having meetings with them, and then I'm going to meet with the mayors in my district on how to access this capital, because it's a lot of money. There's no reason that, everybody shouldn't be benefiting from this. And that's really my mission right now, to make sure that, minorities have a stake in this IJA infrastructure money.
Is that Mayor Landrieu you were referring to?
Landrieu, yes.
Mayor Landrieu.
Yeah.
And I know we're approaching the end of this, but it's kind of interesting how this may double back on the conversation that we were having for the first for the last hour, the hour before this, on affirmative action. Because if they're saying anything that's race-based is unconstitutional, then that may have implications for minority set-asides, even though there's so much evidence that there's so rampant discrimination, and that if, like right now, even though they're told they have to do these minority set-asides,
they don't.
What you're telling me is right, they don't. And there are all these ways around it. Like, they are constantly reinforcing these like very racist exclusionary notions, and you're fighting to get them to not do it. And this tool that just says, this is the goal, may be taken away. Right. Do you think that might affect or make it more difficult to do the work that you're trying to do right now?
Oh, believe me, I am like, I've got my shoulder up against a rock that is way bigger than I can handle, but I continue to push and, make inroads where I can. I am going to do the best I can in order to make sure that everybody has the opportunity in this country to participate. There is enough in this country for everyone to benefit from its greatness. I always say that. And, I'm trying to hold the feet to the fire in that respect. So, I have little wins here and there, but, I really, really want to make a difference on this infrastructure money. And so, also, I'm also in the fight of trying to get, there's no minority set aside program at the Federal Railroad Administration. When I got there, there's no MBE program there. All these years, can you imagine that?
Wow.
No minority participation necessary. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to ask the question. I said, well, let me see your MBE goals. And they all looked around the room and they finally said, oh, we don't have one. I mean, the FAA, the aviation, the highway, everybody else has it, not the railroads. Mm. And so I've been working on that for the last year, getting that into place. That's going to have to go, probably end up before the Supreme Court as well. But, we're going through the routine of trying to get it done. So that's really going to be up in the air now too, with all of this, going on with affirmative action, like you said. it could potentially run into that roadblock now. So it's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle.
That's that's why I keep just trying to look at solutions and stuff that we have. So I know we've reached that time, right? This week, Congressman, is there's something you'd like to add? Anything that you'd like to say to close off this segment?
No, I just just want to thank for the opportunity to come on, and hopefully some folks are listening, and I can take some information to the public and what's going on in Washington and the things I'm trying to accomplish, and that they can reach out to my office in Washington or New Jersey. I have 3 offices in New Jersey and 1 in Washington, and please write me, send emails, and let me know what your feeling are on different issues, and we try to address them. So,
Congressman, I met a young man who graduated from Payne Tech, and he gave a testimony. It's the best school ever. He's going on to he graduated, and he's now going to Seton Hall and a pre-law program, and it's so funny. And he said he had the opportunity to talk to Bill a lot. I said, Assemblyman Payne, yeah, Bill came by and talked. That was so funny. It was like he was first name basis, but he just couldn't talk enough about Payne Tech.
Yeah, Uncle Bill's at the school a lot. He really takes a lot of pride in that, and it's really a great honor to have the school named after him. It's really heartwarming and appreciative that that the county executive felt it was proper to do that. He was an educator first. He was a teacher, so probably.
Your dad too, right?
Huh?
Your dad too, right? Your
No,
dad
my
was an
father.
educator.
My father.
I thought you were talking about Bill. Okay.
No.
Uncle Assemblyman Payne.
Yeah. No, Uncle Bill's a teacher too, but he wasn't in education. But who's tried to do more in terms of Black folks in education than him with the Amistad legislation?
That's right.
It's something that they all understand is important. So, yeah, it's really nice, to go by there and see the work that they're doing. And so, the bad thing is people come to me in the street and like, please can my child get in your school? And I'm like, I have to explain to them that, unfortunately, it's named after my father, and I really don't have, much to do with, anything to do with who gets to go there or not. So
it's the county system, right?
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, it's a great honor. It really is.
All right, so I know we're reaching this.
And I think he might be listening. To my Uncle Bill, happy birthday tomorrow. He'll be 91.
Nice. Congratulations.
Happy born.
Happy birthday, Uncle Bill.
Yeah. We have to have him back on again.
That's right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And right. DJ Rhino, you came on at the very beginning of the Payne report, and so talk to us. We'll let you close us out. If you have any questions. Yes,
his birthday.
I know the Congressman always enjoys hearing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, well, we don't really have time. I just want to say happy anniversary to Eric B. and Rakim for their debut album that was put out this day back in 1987, Paid in Full.
Wow.
Which just took off, man. I remember how long and heavy it was awaited, because when they first put out their first single, Eric B's for President and My Melody on the flip side, that came out in, I believe, spring of '86. And we didn't hear from them. All we had was that single, and for a whole year we didn't hear anything else from them. And then when they dropped the next single, This was after they switched their they left Zakia Records and went to 4th and Broadway Records, and they put out their second single, which was I Know You Got Soul, and they dropped that right around the time when they dropped the album, which was On This Day back in 1987, and the name of the album was Paid in Full. So happy anniversary to Eric B and Rakim. Also, you know, we had the brother Naseed Gifted on, and when I first really met that brother, well, I met him before on the show, but meeting him in person was at the ChemFest last year. And my brother Malik Griffin, he has a comic book called Reflex X. This is my brother Malik Griffin's work. He goes by the name Malik Mania, Malik with a Q, and it's all one word, Malik Mania. He's on. We can catch Malik Mania at all platforms. He just got his comic book Reflex X in a few of the comic book stores, known comic book stores now. So he's out there now. And you know, I watched. You know, me and Malik go back when we were like kids. You know, we were 11, 12 years old. I watched him. You know, we were doing graffiti. He was always doing characters and letters and all kinds of stuff and comics and stuff. So he's been doing this for years. So he's finally getting his break. He's finally getting his issues in stores now. So definitely check him out. Again, Malik Mania, Malik with a Q. Malik one is all one word, Malik Mania. Check him out on all platforms.
All right, thank you.
That's it for me.
Thank you again, man. And
Well, one last thing, Jonathan. Before we go, I got my NAACP shirt. We buried Natasha today, and as I was going to the funeral, I got word that we lost Dr. Mutulu Shakur. I mentioned it there at the top, right? But Dr. Mutulu Shakur is an ancestor now. So we got to really have another segment on why he was important in the hip hop legacy with Pac and all that. But he left us this morning in his sleep and is no longer in pain. And we fought like hell to get him out so he wouldn't die in the clutches of the state.
Right.
How was the services for Tasha?
Oh, it was incredible. You would be very proud of Councilman and Pastor Pat Council. He had to come behind the mayor and do a eulogy, and I'm like, Pat gonna come behind Raz because Raz lit it up. And he did, but he came. You know, everybody was there. The love was there. It was epic, you know.
Was it white and yellow flowing?
Huh?
Everybody wear their white and yellow?
Yeah, a lot of people did. A lot of people did. They certainly did.
You know, I think that the thing that stood out for me from Pat was in his eulogy was being able to count on somebody, right? You know, and,
show up.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting, right? But you know, because not everybody's gonna answer your phone call, right? You know, you even got people who you call so-called friends will ignore your phone call. But the way he was IDing Natasha was she was not that person. She was the person that would answer your call, and that's friendship. Because even the Bible says a friend would stick closer to you than any family member. So when he was talking about all those campaigns, door knockings, cold weather, rain, snow, you know, he showed up.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that was an incredible eulogy. I thought Pat did an incredible job.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I'm really sorry I missed that. I guess they didn't read my letter then. I sent the letter to the services, but
I'm sure they got it though.
Yeah. But you know, I mentioned in the letters them council meetings back in the day when y'all weren't too sure about me yet, and Tasha used to give me hell, but you know, over the years, you know, she got to know me, and you know, we had mutual respect for each other, and I even got her to smile once. So you know, I'm gonna miss her.
She held you accountable. That's
absolutely.
She held everybody accountable. She argued with everybody.
Absolutely.
But she'd have your back though.
No doubt.
Yeah. They told me some of those stories, you know.
Oh yeah.
But it was well attended, you know. And you know, one of the things I kept thinking about was is what I heard T. Jake said one time. He said, whenever you see people who die, he said, it's difficult for you to believe. He said, but it looks like the devil has won, but he hasn't. He said, so when you look at people who are in that box, he said, don't get it twisted. He said, it looked like the devil has won, but he has not won, right? Because none of us have ever been on the other side. So therefore, we don't know what it looks like. We're going to miss her in her natural form. We're going to miss her here, but we've got those memories. But you always hear the man of God always says, we're going to see them again. And I think that's what we can hold on to.
Yeah, he said that at Whitney's funeral when that song comes on and you hear her voice and then that memory come back. Yeah.
I thought that, I think about that all the time because that you know that's I mean when John lost his father, I was thinking about that. I said, man, I know if I could say something to John, I would say I know it looks like the devil's won. And then I thought about the same thing, when you lost your father, Congressman, it looks like the devil's won, but he hasn't, right? And I think we've got to remember that. And I thought that when T.D. Jakes said that, I said, wow, that really is true. And that's something we need to hold on to.
Well,
said
this is, yep. And I know we're going to have another show on it, just talking about all the things that we started talking about this week and last week, because there was a great impact on the community. And we have reached the end of this segment of this show. I'd like to thank all the guests we had on, Marques Lewis on that first segment. We'd like to thank we'd like to thank Elise Boddie. Good luck. She used to teach at Rutgers. She's now going to be teaching at the University of Michigan. And good luck to her on that. We also thank our guest, Professor Carter, and our guest from the Urban League.
Vivian.
As well. Vivian, yes.
Frazier.
Yes, Vivian Frazier on.
What was Professor Carter talking about, Lord?
Affirmative action again.
Civics and she's been constantly coming on talking about civics and
that's another one that gives me hell.
Yeah, and so thank you to Naseed Gifted, also on the show. So we are ending our broadcast, but
and then of course
all of our guests.
We definitely want to thank the Congressman for coming on the Payne report.
That was the first thank you for the Payne report.
Make no mistake, this is the Payne hour.
That's right. And thank you for indulging me. I appreciate that.
Featuring Jonathan Austin.
Well, I appreciate the indulgence for the purposes of civics and civic engagement.
Absolutely.
So until next time.
All right.